Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. The Unspoken Relative. The door to the interrogation room creaked open. A girl was inside, still in the depths of REM sleep, did not stir. Sleep was all she had, her only escape and only therapy from her current fate. She remained curled up on top of the table like a feline, conserving her energy before the hellhounds would be turned loose on her. Haley, a psychiatrist, made her way into the room. She could see the subject. Emily had insomniac circles around her eyes that made her look like a raccoon almost. Haley felt bad for having to wake her, but if Emily wanted sleep, she would need to talk at some point. She reached out and took Emily's hands in hers. They were callow and clammy. Emily emitted a faint whimper, but her eyes remained closed. Haley let go of her hands and brushed Emily's hair. Emily stirred, and her eyes sluggishly opened. Her dark eyes, with saucers for pupils, studied the green emeralds Haley had for eyes. They remained still, watching, then closed again. "Come on, hun. Time to get up." Haley spoke, lightly shaking her. Emily whimpered and covered her face with her arms. Haley stood and scooped her off the table. She expected a fight, but Emily remained docile in her grasp. Before Haley could put her down, Emily clung to her and rested her head on Haley's shoulder. It was difficult to imagine Emily was capable of what the police were accusing her of. Emily was acting more like an 8-year-old than 18. That could be cracked up to the recent traumatic experience she endured. She had recently learned who her real father was, after he took her mother, and stepfather hostage. Her mother was currently recovering from injuries in the hospital, while her stepfather had succumbed to his injuries. Emily wailed suddenly, catching Haley off guard. The reaction was so sudden that Haley almost dropped her. "Honey," Emily buried her face in Haley's chest, with heaving sobs that made her tremble all over. Haley rubbed her back and comforted her, something that Emily never got from anyone since they found her in the house. She had passed out with the landline phone still in her grasp, with a split table beneath her that broke her fall. Haley had a job to do here, however, and that was not to comfort a possible suspect. Haley gently pried her off and sat Emily down in a chair. "I'm going to be honest," Haley began. "They suspect you conspired with your father. All the melanin drained from Emily's skin. This couldn't be happening." She quickly shook her head in denial. Emily strained herself, attempting to protest, but her voice cracked, and her words died in her throat. "You may want to see this," Haley said, handing her a tablet. A frightened moan escaped her mouth when the video started playing. When Emily learned the truth, she attacked and interrogated her stepfather in the basement for putting a wool over her eyes, while her real father was otherwise engaged upstairs. And now, law enforcement suspected she was hiding her father's whereabouts. They intended to use this footage as leverage against her if she refused to cooperate. Her knees drew up to her chest as reality washed over her. His blood was on her hands too, whether she liked it or not. But this didn't mean that she conspired with her father. They needed to know that. Emily tried to speak again, but like before, her words could not reach the surface. Like baby sea turtles being plucked away by famished seagulls before reaching the ocean, words still eluded her. She buried her face in her hands, sighing shakily. Haley placed a small notebook before her along with a pencil. Emily sniffled and started to write. "So, he took your cuffs off for good behavior?" Haley asked. Emily nodded. "And after you found out the truth, you became angry with your stepfather?" Emily replied with a reluctant nod. She wrote her next question with a trembling hand. "There's nothing I can do to avoid prison, is there?" Emily pushed the notebook over to Haley, with tears starting to trickle down her face again. "You can tell me where he is," Haley said. Emily whimpered in frustration. "I don't know where he is, because I did not conspire with him," she wrote. "It's not up to me on what happens to you," Haley began. "But you need to give them something if you wish to avoid prison. Even if you didn't conspire with him, you still assaulted your stepfather, who is now dead." Emily huffed and snatched the notebook. "My father's gun killed him, not me," she wrote. "You stabbed your stepfather with a fork. He already had a severed leg and a missing finger, which I believe had his wedding ring on it. You very well could have. Do you think a jury would let you go free after that?" Emily choked back a sob. "I'm sorry, hun. I know you were under a great deal of stress, but that still does not excuse your actions. He's one of my teachers in high school, okay? Mr. Black is what he goes by. I'm sure that's how he found out that I was his daughter." Emily wrote. "Okay, maybe that will help them find him." "Anything else?" Haley asked. "Please, I need to be there for my mom, so she pulls through." Emily wrote, "I'll see what they think about this," Haley said, taking the notebook with her. "But after what you did to your stepfather, I doubt you'll be allowed to see your mother in the hospital. It's for her own safety." Emily's face fumed in disbelief at what she heard. With that, Haley left her to sit alone with her thoughts. 2. When the sheriff entered the interrogation room, Emily's heart sank like an anchor to the depths. She sheepishly wiped her tears away with her sleeves. "Save your crocodile tears for another day," his eyes said. "You'll be held at a local hotel under house arrest till your court date," the sheriff said, attaching a tracker to her ankle. "You can use the phone inside the motel to call your mother in the hospital. Perhaps that will help you find your voice again. Better pray you find it by your court date," he continued, escorting her out. 3. On court day, her mother was not well enough to attend. However, she was thankfully still alive and recovering. Emily quietly sat next to her appointed lawyer. The judge and jury were informed that, due to the events Emily had been through, she had trouble speaking, and her lawyer would speak for her. They had given her a notebook and pen to use to communicate as well. Emily was prepared to own up to what she did, however. The crowd was certainly a surprise, which threw her off. She hoped it stemmed from curiosity about her father, rather than hatred towards her. She nervously watched as the judge made his way to the podium. He was an older gentleman with a horseshoe mustache that commanded respect. A man with true grit that would not hesitate to punish any poor soul that dared question his authority. To the full extent of the law, he despised any scumbag attorney that would willingly fight for a defendant that was obviously guilty. Emily could not tell what his initial impression was of her just yet. "Take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Let's be mindful of the jury and the defendant. Keep y'all's voices down so they can hear themselves think." The judge spoke as the jury filed in. Emily reluctantly turned to see who her selected peers would be. 6 women of varying ages filed in first. Perhaps she had a chance of being shown mercy after all. 6 men followed, and suddenly her throat felt deprived of oxygen, and her eyes dilated like saucers. The word escaped her lips, and she quickly covered her mouth with both hands. But the room had grown silent as a Buddhist temple. It was too late. "What was that, miss?" The judge spoke, making her flinch. Emily quickly turned away from the jury and spoke for what felt like the first time in weeks. Nothing. Sorry." She spoke with an awkward rise in her voice. "Mind repeating what you said a moment ago? I was under the impression that you didn't speak." The judge said, "Objection, Your Honor." Her attorney stepped in. "Overruled. You were saying, miss?" The judge spoke. Emily swallowed hard, and her skin was as crimson as a lobster. Much like a lobster, she was in hot water now as well. "Do you want to be held in contempt for lying to the court about your condition?" the judge asked. No, I'm not," she hiccuped. "Lying. Enlighten me on how you did not lie to the court, miss." The judge pressed. "Your Honor, I made it clear she has difficulty speaking, and that she is, or in this case, was temporarily mute. The key word was temporarily." Her attorney spoke clearly. "She speak for herself now, mister. Now, would you or she care to repeat what her first spoken word was, so we can move forward with this case? The judge replied, "Objection, Your Honor." Her attorney spoke before Emily placed her hand on his wrist. Overruled. The judge spoke to him. "Please," Emily said to her attorney before standing to face the judge. I saw someone that looked like my dad. That's all. I'm mistaken, obviously. But it took me by surprise. So, we have it on record. Repeat the exact word you spoke for me, miss. I will not ask you again." The judge said, "Daddy, that's what I said. I was mistaken. Sorry, Your Honor." Emily spoke meekly. "Why don't you point out the individual you mistook for him? Would you kindly?" The judge spoke. A small trickle ran between her legs, and Emily winced, hating herself. In fact, why don't we show everyone what her father looks like? Shall we? The judge said. And a projector flashed a picture of Mr. Black on the wall behind him. This is the man responsible for the death of Emily's stepfather and for her mother, who is currently in hospice care. What we are here for currently, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is to figure out whether Emily knows of his whereabouts, and two, whether she conspired with him against her stepfather. The judge spoke. "Now, isn't that a load of horse shit?" A voice cackled. A man in the jury stood, and Emily's fears were confirmed. His disguise could fool most, but not her. You think she's capable of this? Hell, she couldn't even keep it together when she caught a glance of my face. Mr. Black laughed, pressing his revolver against another juror, urging them to walk up with him. The police officers and security guards all drew their weapons, but Mr. Black revealed his own weapon that was strapped to his chest. There was a rise of panic from the bystanders and the jury. "Enough!" the judge roared, and the crowd simmered down. As the Joker once said, "Let's not blow this out of proportion. I'll only take a moment of your time, one way or another." Mr. Black said, "You've got balls showing your face around here." The judge spoke. "I'm just here to make sure an innocent person doesn't go to jail. Lord knows the law has a way of fucking that up." Mr. Black replied, "I propose an exchange then. You go to jail while she goes free. That, I reckon, is how it should have been all along." The judge said, "Ha! You should go on stage and see how far that joke gets ya." Mr. Black cackled. "What's the plan here? What's your end game?" The judge asked. "It's simple. If you all want to live, you let us leave quietly. Remember, the juror I replaced is elsewhere, awaiting your assistance." Mr. Black said. The judge, a veteran from the war in Afghanistan, recognized the bomb Mr. Black had strapped to his chest. It was capable of taking out a whole block. Everyone inside this building would be cooked like a Thanksgiving turkey when all was said and done. "Drop y'all's weapons," the judge ordered. The officers followed suit. "Let's be on our way, Emily." Mr. Black spoke. A frightened moan escaped her mouth. She had no idea her father was capable of this. He would be labeled as a terrorist in the news. There was no coming back from that. "Don't waste my time, sweetheart," Mr. Black hissed, pressing his revolver against the juror's forehead. Emily whimpered and reluctantly stood up. "Can you tell me where the other juror is before you go?" the judge asked. "Good man," Mr. Black said, opening the door to the judge's quarters. Through there was a quick exit to the parking lot. "I left a note with an address under my juror seat. If anyone stops me, that place will blow too," Mr. Black said. Emily gagged as her nerves started getting the better of her. This was all too much to take in. But Mr. Black tugged her inside by the collar of her shirt, urging her to keep moving, and they ran to the exit door. Outside, there were 2 cars waiting for them. Mr. Black shoved his hostage to the floor and slammed the door shut behind him. Emily eyed both cars in confusion. She yelped when she felt something hot sting her arm. Emily looked up at her father as everything around her grew brighter. "Why?" she whimpered. "Can't risk you having second thoughts," Mr. Black replied with a wink, removing the small needle from her arm. Emily was too weak to resist when he laid her down in the back seat of a Chrysler 300. He rode in a different car, and she passed out before they drove away. 4. Emily awoke with a start in what felt like another lifetime. She was cocooned in a hammock, ready to hatch into a new life, it seemed. Her sluggish eyes registered a clustered forest of coconut palms around her, and a man sitting at a nearby table. He wore a straw hat and was sipping on a pina colada. "Welcome back," Mr. Black said. The ocean was a shimmering shade of teal in the sunlight, roaring in the distance. "Is Mom okay?" Emily slurred. "She'll be fine," Mr. Black said, "but she'll need her distance for some time before she forgives us." Lucid Dr. Mira Santos aligns her pen at a precise 90-degree angle to her notepad, then adjusts it to 89. Perfect precision matters. Her office presents an unbroken landscape of whites and grays, walls, furniture, even the spines of journals arranged by height on custom shelving. Her diplomas hang at measured intervals: Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins Fellowship, Stanford Neuropsychiatry. I keep having these dreams where pieces of myself are missing, Jamie Whitcomb explains, voice carrying an unsettling familiarity Mira can't place. Like someone tore pages from my story. She observes his hands as they animate his words. Index finger extended, thumb perpendicular. A gesture triggering a microsecond of déjà vu that she immediately classifies. Transient memory phenomenon. No clinical significance. Perhaps we could explore these gaps through guided imagery, she suggests, noting the clock. 2:37. I think my unconscious is getting tired of being ignored, Jamie says, meeting her eyes with unexpected directness. His fingers tap against his knee. Tap, tap, pause, tap. a rhythm that seems momentarily significant, then doesn't. You wrote something about this, actually. How the mind creates increasingly dramatic interventions when we persist in avoidance. Your work on trauma compartmentalization changed how I understand myself. Mira's hand pauses. Few patients research their therapists so thoroughly. She glances down and notices a blue smudge on her thumb that wasn't there moments ago. When not directly observed, it seems to shift slightly, like water finding its level. After Jamie leaves, she documents. Patient demonstrates unusual knowledge of practitioner's methodology. The words form in reassuring black ink. She categorizes the blue smudge. Stress-induced perceptual anomaly. Clinical terminology creates immediate distance. Safety through classification. Her calendar displays afternoon appointments with a precise rectangle marked personal reflection at 2:30 each day. Time methodically scheduled for not thinking about what happened. 300 days of structured avoidance. She notices blue ink spreading in tomorrow's reflection block. Jamie Whitcomb, second consultation. She has no memory of scheduling this. Dr. Chen appears in her doorway. Mira, you've scheduled during your personal time tomorrow. The patient required accommodation. She lies with clinical detachment. You haven't adjusted that time block in almost a year, he observes, eyes lingering on her hand, where the blue smudge seems to pulse with her heartbeat. Her apartment mirrors her professional space, meticulously organized in whites and grays. She moves efficiently through rooms systematically purged of memory. Each belonging serves logical purpose. Control through environmental precision. Her path includes a mathematically precise 60-degree turn at the hallway's end. Gaze sliding past the single disruption in her colorless sanctuary. A cerulean blue door she hasn't opened in 300 days. For a heartbeat, vanilla shampoo scent registers. Small fingers sticky with breakfast syrup. A child's laughter, like wind chimes. Pulse accelerates. Tachycardia, 97 beats per minute. Respiratory rate increased 18%. Diagnosis: acute stress response. Treatment: continued avoidance. She walks past, careful not to touch the blue. Mira prepares for Jamie's second session, straightening her already straight pens. The blue stain has spread overnight, now covering her palm entirely. She tugs her sleeve lower. Patient demonstrates unusual knowledge of practitioner's methodology, she writes. Possible prior envy. She stops. The words appear in blue ink despite her black pen. She selects another. Same result. Equipment. Malfunction. Statistically improbable. Perceptual anomaly. Equally unlikely. Classification. Inconclusive. When Jamie enters, the room temperature drops 3 degrees. Calibration error, surely. The clock's second hand stutters. Tick, pause, tick, tick. Stretching moments unnaturally. Mira's breath forms small clouds that hover before dissipating. I researched you, she says, professional tone brittle. Your contact information leads nowhere. Perhaps I don't exist within your acceptable parameters, Jamie replies, something shifting behind his eyes. His features seem unstable today. A 30-something stranger one moment, then briefly showing contours of a younger face. Isn't that your specialty, Dr. Santos? Creating parameters that exclude what hurts too much? The air carries a faint antiseptic smell. Hospital corridors, grief-saturated waiting rooms. Olfactory hallucination. Unlikely, but not impossible. You've built your career helping others face what you avoid, Jamie says, fingers forming that distinctive gesture, index extended, thumb perpendicular. In your article, you wrote about integration, but your office calendar tells a different story. Her diploma wavers when not directly observed. Doctor of Medicine briefly becoming Mother Who Wasn't, before snapping back when she focuses on it. Do you believe in astronomy, Dr. Santos? Jamie asks, voice suddenly higher-pitched. That stars remember us even when clouds block our view? Even when we're gone? Mira's pen freezes. Mid-note. A child had asked her a nearly identical question once. Coincidence? Statistically impossible. We should focus on your experiences, she attempts, but her voice falters. Like you focus during your personal reflection blocks? His eyes shift color momentarily, from brown to startling blue. The time you carefully schedule for not remembering, the antiseptic smell intensifies. Her bookcase blurs at the edges, white shelves rippling like water, book spines dissolving into hospital corridor signs, small hand in hers, warm against her palm. Blue wool sweater with wooden buttons she'd helped fasten. Vanilla shampoo. Mira blinks rapidly. Classification: intrusive memory fragment. Treatment: compartmentalization. The clinical term disintegrates in her mind. You're diagnosing yourself in the third person, Jamie observes, his voice oscillating between adult articulation and childlike directness. Does Harvard teach doctors to hide inside words when feelings get too big? The pen in her hand turns liquid, blue ink flowing across her fingers in tiny rivulets that form star-like patterns on her skin. When Jamie leaves, or did he simply fade, Mira attempts to reorient. She aligns her pen perpendicular to her notepad, but blue ink pools beneath it, refusing containment. Dr. Chen enters, without knocking. The room temperature normalizes instantly, but blue stains remain across her notes, her desk, her hands. The Wilkins consultation, he says with unusual directness. They've requested another therapist. Said you seemed elsewhere. I maintained appropriate clinical distance, she recites. Like you maintain distance from the children's ward? His tone softens. 300 days, Mira. I saw you outside the memorial wall yesterday. He studies her, colleague and friend, visibly conflicted. Remember Elliot at the fundraiser concert? That Chopin nocturne we practiced for weeks? Him turning pages with that perfect timing? Chen's fingers mimic playing piano keys. When I asked how he knew exactly when, he said, "The music tells me," Mira finishes, throat constricting. It gets ready to need more space. Chen places a blue folder on her desk. You told Phillips to compartmentalize grief. That's not what you taught before. The patient was mirroring your strategy. Chen interrupts gently. Look at your hands. The blue has spread past her wrists, pulsing with her heartbeat. That night, the blue door PULGLSES with its own tutha. Mira arrives for Jamie's third session to find him already seated. Today he wears a blue sweater with wooden buttons instead of his usual suit. Her office temperature has dropped 10 degrees overnight. Facility malfunction, she mutters, but her breath forms dense clouds. The second hand on her wall clock stutters. Tick, tick, stop, backward tick, then freezes at precisely 2:37. Your calendar has transformed, Jamie observes. Blue ink has spread across her appointment book, forming distinct patterns. The Big Dipper, Orion, constellations she once traced on a bedroom ceiling. Irregularity in the ink compu. The words disintegrate before she can complete them. Her diagnostic vocabulary suddenly foreign. Letters rearranging themselves, still trying to diagnose away what you feel? Jamie asks. His features shift. Adult one moment, then child's eyes, gazing from adult face, then small fingers emerging from suit sleeves. How's that working after 300 days? The antiseptic smell intensifies. Hospital-grade disinfectant, coffee from a nurse's station, vending machine cookies. Her cream walls ripple. Hospital corridor, green bleeding through, like watercolors on wet paper. Patient exhibits acute dissoc. She can't complete the word. The pen trembles between her fingers as blue ink pools on the page, forming tiny rivulets that flow toward her like seeking things. You taught me about grounding techniques, Jamie says, his voice shifting higher. The hand gesture again. Index extended, thumb perpendicular. When things feel overwhelming, find 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch. I never taught. Mira stops. She never met Jamie before 300 days ago. Statistical impossibility. Logical incongruence. Professional boundaries compromised. When things get scary, he continues. Features now unmistakably childlike. beneath adult bone structure. Find something solid to hold on to, like your hand when we crossed parking lots. Her bookcase dissolves completely, revealing hospital waiting area chairs. The leather beneath her fingertips becomes vinyl, cold, sterile. A water cooler gurgles in the corner where her ficus plant had been moments before. The clock face melts, numbers flowing into blue puddles. Her diplomas rearrange into memorial service programs. This represents functional. Clinical terminology evaporates mid-thought. Her desk transforms into the hospital admitting counter, where she'd stood precisely 300 days ago. Still hiding inside Harvard vocabulary? Jamie's adult clothing now hangs from a child's frame. Blue sweater with sleeves rolled 6 times, pants puddling around small sneakers. Elliot's face now fully visible, only his eyes retaining adult knowledge. Does categorizing grief really make it go away? VANILLASHAPOO. Apple detangler. Chocolate milk breath. This isn't Her hands convulse, sending her pen spinning across the floor. This cannot. The pen bleeds blue across linoleum, spreading toward her in tributary patterns that form exact replicas of the constellation drawings from Elliot's bedroom ceiling. Rain hammers against glass. Rhythmic squeak thump of wipers fighting deluge. Her phone vibrates against her ear. Dr. Chen's voice, tense with urgency. "I understand this patient is in crisis," she hears herself say, "but I'm driving with my son. Can I call you back in 5? "Mommy," Elliot's voice from the back seat. "Do stars remember us, even when we don't remember to look at them?" A question deserving thoughtful response. Philosophical inquiry from a 5-year-old mind. Her eyes flick to the rearview mirror, his serious expression awaiting wisdom, instead of to the road ahead. Her choice, her responsibility. Headlights through rain. Blinding. Impact. Metal screaming against metal. Her body thrown forward. Airbag deploying half-second too late. The silence after. "You treat this like a case study in your textbook," Jamie Elliott says, now entirely child-sized, but speaking with impossible adult knowledge. "Is that easier than admitting you chose the phone call over watching the road?" The words DIETONATE inside her chest. Breath fracturing. Pulse arrhythmic. 300 days of defenses disintegrating. Post-traumatic stress with complete language fails completely. Her vocabulary, once armor against emotion, now meaningless sounds against memory's tide. Hospital corridor stretches infinitely before her. Antiseptic burning her nostrils. Time frozen at 2:37 a.m. The moment unchanged, despite 300 days of scientific distance, 300 days of personal reflection spent deliberately not reflecting. She reaches for Jamie/Elliot, but her hands pass through his form, encountering only absence. Not hallucination, but memory materialized. I wasn't. The truth rises like floodwater, threatening to drown her. Clinical terminology evaporating. Harvard training useless against grief's undertow. I wasn't paying attention when it mattered most. Her hands shake uncontrollably. Blue ink flows across the floor, spreading from her pen, her notepad, her appointment book, all the places she's documented others' pain while refusing to acknowledge her own. My entire career, she whispers, helping others face what I couldn't bear to see. Mira finds herself kneeling on cold hospital tiles, forehead against sterile floor, professional identity dissolving in tears, suppressed for 300 days. I chose the phone call over watching the road. She confesses to emptiness, to absence, to irreversible consequence. The hospital corridor wavers, then dissolves. She's back in her office, familiar space rendered foreign by truth. Blue ink surrounds her, no longer threatening, but awaiting direction. Her diplomas, once sources of pride, now seem incomplete chapters in a larger story. She drives home through rain, no longer calculating statistical probabilities of hydroplaning, but feeling water against glass. Her clinical detachment, once armor, now recognized as barrier. Her hands on the steering wheel remember another rainy night, another drive, different outcome, same hands. Her apartment, meticulously controlled in whites and grays, appears through shifted perception. Not ordered, but empty. Not peaceful, but silent. 300 days of creating space that demanded nothing, remembered nothing, reflected nothing back to her. The hallway stretches before her. No more precise 60-degree turn. No more transient memory phenomenon diagnosis when vanilla scent registers. Tonight, she walks deliberately toward what she's avoided. The blue door pulses with its own heartbeat. Gentle rhythm, both inviting and terrifying. Blue light seeps beneath, casting underwater reflections across the floor. Her pulse accelerates. Tachycardia, 97 beats per minute. Old diagnostic habit. Same physical response. New understanding. She places her palm against the wood. Warm. Alive. An answering pressure, as if something, someone, presses back from beyond. I'm choosing to remember, she whispers, voice breaking, and turns the knob. Beyond isn't the sharp pain she feared, but a space where blues shift from midnight depth to dawn's gentle awakening. Stars hang suspended, constellations from a ceiling painted on a Saturday afternoon with small hands guiding hers. Not distant points, but presences casting soft illumination. The air carries forgotten scents: vanilla shampoo, apple detangler, chocolate milk. Before bedtime, piano notes drift through blue. Chopin Nocturne, 4 hands at different octaves. Laughter when they missed transitions. Eliot sits cross-legged beneath Draco, his favorite constellation, because dragons should get to live in the sky too. He wears the blue sweater with wooden buttons she'd helped him fasten that morning. When he looks up, his eyes hold both childlike wonder and impossible understanding. "You finally came," he says simply. "I was afraid," she answers, professional terminology inadequate for the ache in her chest. His small hand reaches for hers. Warm pressure, simultaneously present and preserved from before. "I've been here the whole time. I'm sorry," she tells him, words carrying 300 days of avoided grief. "I looked away when I should have been watching the road." He nods, serious expression, exactly as she'd seen in that final rear-view glance. "You were helping somebody who needed you. That's what doctors do." "Not more important than you," she whispers, voice raw. He considers this with child's directness. Maybe not more or less, just different. Like how we needed different sides of the piano bench to reach all the keys. She hadn't expected wisdom from loss, hadn't allowed possibility beyond absence. "Remember when I asked about stars?" he says, looking upward. "If they remember us when clouds come?" She nods, tears flowing without clinical categorization. "They do," he says with certainty. "Even when nobody's looking up, blue light pulses around them, not invading, but connecting. Stars above and blue beneath, creating space between memory and presence where healing begins. Your patients need you to remember too," he says, child's voice with unchildlike insight. "Not just me, but what happened?" She nods, understanding forming from fractured pieces. Not compartmentalization, but integration. Not absence, but transformation. Not forgetting, but carrying forward. "I won't stop looking for you in the stars," she promises. His smile combines mischief with impossible wisdom. "Even when you forget, I'll remember. That's what stars do." When Mira awakens, dried tears trace her cheeks. Her office has transformed. Pearl gray walls now carry blue undertones that shift with changing light. Harvard credentials hang beside a child's drawing of constellations labeled "Me and Mommy's Star Map." The clock runs smoothly past 2:37, that moment acknowledged rather than avoided. On her desk sits a fountain pen filled with blue ink. Her deliberate choice now, not mysterious manifestation. Beside it, her appointment book with Integration practice, replacing the blocks formerly labeled personal reflection. Not scheduled avoidance, but purposeful remembering. The phone rings. Dr. Chen about an urgent patient crisis. 300 days ago, she would have answered immediately. Today, she notes the time, 5:27 p.m. Elliot's astronomy club meets in her memory at 5:30. "I'll call back in 20 minutes," she tells the receptionist. "I have an important appointment first." She allows herself to remember for exactly 3 minutes. Blue sweater, constellation maps, questions about stars, before returning to professional responsibilities with renewed presence. Later that week, a new patient sits across from her, describing familiar patterns. "After my daughter's accident, I created separate compartments," the woman explains, fingers tracing invisible boundaries on the armrest. Work Susan never mentions Emily. Mother Susan only exists on scheduled Sundays, when I permit myself to visit her room. Mira recognizes her former self in this careful division. 300 days ago, she would have praised this compartmentalization as adaptive coping. Standard protocol suggests emotional containment during grief responses. Mira pauses, feeling blue ink against her fingertips. She deliberately sets her manual aside. "Protocols have their place," she says, leaning forward slightly. "But they can't account for how grief rewrites our internal maps. Compartmentalizing doesn't actually protect us. It fragments us. Integration doesn't mean constant pain, but allowing memory to exist alongside present moment." The woman's eyes fill with tears. "How?" "By acknowledging both your professional competence and your profound loss, not as separate identities, but as equally true aspects of who you are now." Later, Mira opens her own case file. She writes, "Subject demonstrates initial success in memory integration. Professional identity remains intact while accommodating emotional truth. Continued practice indicated." She pauses, then adds, "The stars remember us, even when we forget to look up." She signs the entry. Day 321. The blue ink catches light as it dries. Not the end of grief, but the beginning of carrying it differently. Death of the lilacs. I never should have opened that letter. But from the moment my fingers brushed the aged paper, thin and fragile, it seduced me. It all started on estate sale day. On any other Thursday, I would wake up crazy excited, strip out of my cotton PJs, and swap them for jeans and my gray V-neck, the one with vintage across the chest in fading white vinyl. I would appreciate the scent of the fresh lilacs that had just bloomed outside my window, their enchanting aroma drifting in as a passenger on the early morning breeze. Then I'd head out for a long, adventurous day of treasure hunting. There's something magical about rescuing a forgotten piece of furniture or trinket. It drives me, knowing that each piece will start a new life, absorbing new memories. It is intoxicating. But that Thursday, I woke up with an uneasy feeling that I immediately brushed off, assuming it was residual bad dream funk. Through my vintage lace curtains, I could see evidence of a cloudy day, doing nothing to brighten my spirit or improve my mood. And then there were the lilacs. This morning, their fragrance was thick, overpowering, and instantly turned my stomach. With an irritated mumble, I reached over and slid the window shut with a sharp thud. Pulling the blanket over my head, I heavily considered going back to sleep. However, 15 minutes later, I was dressed and headed out the door. Unheard of for me. It was as if I had somewhere urgent to be, but when I checked my calendar app, there was nothing booked. As I locked the door behind me, the heavy scent of the lilacs filled the air, overbearing and inescapable. They had sprung up from out of nowhere just a few weeks ago, their soft purple and white blossoms spilling over the wooden railing of my front porch. At first, I welcomed them, admired them, but now they felt invasive, their presence needling at my already fraying mood. I had been at the first sale of the day for about half an hour, and it seemed like a bust. After wandering from room to room, sifting through boxes and stacked containers of someone else's memories, I was just about ready to head to the next stop on my Google Maps list. As I stepped into the kitchen, I suddenly lost my balance and grabbed the long slab of butcher block countertop to steady myself. Instantly, my senses were overwhelmed. Years of long-forgotten Sunday morning breakfasts, afternoon bread proofs, and late-night Christmas cookie bakes. The heavy scent of bacon and coffee made me dizzy and hungry at the same time. I heard a child laughing and turned to see a little girl hiding her giggles behind a cupped hand as she pointed at Tom, chasing Jerry across the flickering screen of an old tube TV. Then a scream rang out, sharp and raw, echoing into my soul, almost as if it came from within. As I released my grip on the countertop, I spun around to see what had happened. Instantly, everything changed. The warm scents of breakfast were gone. The little girl, gone. The TV wasn't even plugged in, its frayed cord hanging eerily off to the side. It was just the humdrum sound of a normal estate sale, with people milling about and haggling the cashier with lower price offers. I just stood still, trying to breathe and make sense of what had just happened, before I could grasp any ounce of stability. A sudden ding from the oven sent me nearly jumping out of my own skin. I bolted past the cashier and straight for the front door. "Edith," I stopped. My feet, my heart, and my breath everything just stopped. My body turned and drifted past the "Watch Your Step" sign as I felt pulled down the wooden steps into the garage. It sat still, empty of people, empty of life, yet oddly full of the scent of lilacs. Why couldn't I escape it? I hadn't been in this room yet. I had peeked inside earlier, but it seemed full of things I usually ignored. Pesticides, old mulch, motor oil, nothing that belonged in an antique booth. Yet here I was, drowning in the scent of lilacs with not a bloom in sight. Why had I come? I wanted to leave. All at once, sunlight pushed its way through the clear glass windows of the garage door, spilling onto a small, frail woman seated at the desk in front of me. The same desk that, just seconds before, had been buried beneath years of dust and piled high with empty boxes. An old ladder leaning against one side. All of that was gone now, and I could smell breakfast again. "Edith, I work all day to put food on this table. You think it's gonna cook itself?" The dark voice boomed behind me. I flinched, but couldn't tear my eyes from her. The woman turned and looked right at me. And then, after just a second of recognition, right through me, she turned back to the desk and in a swift, almost frantic motion, shoved a piece of paper into an envelope. I heard her whispering something, but the words were too soft to make out. "Damn it, woman, where are you?" came the voice from the top of the stairs. My instinct was to spin around, to see him, but my eyes stayed fixed on Edith. She was facing me now, her gaze moving down the staircase as he came down. "You know better than to keep me waiting," he said, his words rolling down the back of my neck like sap oozing from a wounded sweet gum tree. I resisted the urge to wipe it away. Edith slid her trembling hands into her apron. Her gray eyes hovered just above my head, steady in his direction. Slowly, her shoulders curled back, pushing her tiny frame to stand tall. Her chin lifted just enough to prove her fortitude, but the slow rise and fall of her chest wasn't from resolve. It was control, each breath measured to contain her emotions. "Yes, I'm sorry. I should have been more mindful of your time. The bacon's on now. I'll have breakfast ready in just a few minutes." I could feel his heat standing uncomfortably close behind me. The hair on the back of my neck lifted with each of his heavy breaths as he considered his reply. Finally, he muttered, "You'd better." The sound of his heavy boots grew lighter as he moved toward the stairs. Her eyes were back on me, not through me. She stood still for a moment, as if thinking something through. Then, as if she had made her decision, she turned toward the desk and opened the top left drawer. She looked at me again, then down at the drawer. I followed her gaze. With a careful hand, she slid the bottom of the drawer back. pulled the envelope from her apron pocket, placed it in the hollow space, and closed the drawer. Her gaze shifted to me once more, her eyes trying to tell me a story, calling my name. Her mouth opened, her expression full of apology, but no words came. As she took a step forward, the sunlight caught the iridescent trail of a single tear that had run down her cheek. My heart hurt for her. All at once, she was gone. The sun had vanished. The windows on the garage door had been painted over years ago. The acrid smell of gasoline, oil, and pesticides flooding my nose once again. I gasped and wiped my face, realizing that I, too, had tears streaming down my cheeks. I took a few steps toward the desk, my eyes locked on the drawer. My pulse quickened as I reached out to pull it open. "Miss, do you need help?" came a tiny voice from the top of the stairs. I jumped and screamed. Then she screamed. With our hands over our chests, we both burst into laughter. "I am so sorry, doll. I didn't mean to startle you. It's totally okay. I was in my own world." I took a deep, slow breath, in and out. "Actually, yes, I would like some help. I'm interested in this desk, but I don't see a price on it," I said, pointing to the spot where the woman had just been sitting. "Oh, that old thing is junk, honey. One of the drawers is stuck, and it's missing a leg." She turned to head back through the door. I looked at the desk, then back at her. "All the same, I'd love to take it off your hands. Would you take 20 for it?" She stopped and turned around. Her expression shifted. I could see the dollar signs in her eyes and a slight hint of a smirk on her lips. Then, just as quickly, it changed again to a look of faux concern. "Well, that did belong to the homeowner, and I am trying to get the family top dollar. I couldn't possibly let it go for $20, but I imagine they'd be okay with 50. Does that work for you? $20 is usually my price point for old furniture. $20 and little to no damage, other than age. But she was asking 50, and it would need extensive repairs. Not that I was buying it for resale anyway. Honestly, I felt like I was out of mind when I agreed. But the next thing out of my mouth was, "Sure, 50 is great. Can I have someone pick it up in an hour?" Well now, that would be lovely. The edges of the woman's mouth curled into a slow, knowing grin, full of satisfaction, like a cat licking cream from its whiskers. 4 hours, 3 stops, and 2 cups of Java later, I was back home, where Jeff, my not boyfriend, was waiting in front of my driveway with the desk. "Sadie, what were you thinking? This is a piece of junk. Please tell me you got it for free," he grumbled as I slid out of my Jeep. He leaned against the bed of his truck, arms folded, looking cute, but not happy. "Oh, come on. You can see it has great bones," I said, resting my hand on the side of his face as I stood on my tiptoes and gave him a light kiss. He looked into my eyes, sighed, and wrapped his arms around me. "You owe me," I smiled. "Okay, where do you want this thing?" "Back porch, please. Why don't you go make us something to eat while I do your dirty work?" "You got it," I said with a wink. As I walked up the sidewalk, my stomach sank. The lilacs, so full and lush just hours ago, were dead. Their once vibrant petals had shriveled, decay clinging to them, burnishing the edges with shadow. Even though it felt morbid, I reached out to brush one with my fingertip. It crumbled to dust, carried away on the wind. I had enjoyed them while they lasted, until this morning. Now, an ominous feeling settled in my chest, hauntingly familiar, though I couldn't understand why. The scent had been overwhelming earlier, almost stifling, and while I didn't necessarily want them back, their sudden decay felt oddly personal. 10 minutes later, we sat on the back patio, eating lunch and staring at the desk. I debated whether I should tell him about what I had experienced earlier. We had been seeing each other for about 6 months, and things were going mostly okay. He didn't want to put a label on things, which felt like a little bit of a red flag. But I wanted to see where things went a little longer. He had some great qualities. Only time would tell if they outweighed the rest. I really did want things to progress between us. And they say communication is key. So I decided to tell him. As I told him the story, he ate his chicken salad sandwich and slurped his lemonade, his eyes fixed on me, except for the occasional glance at the desk. When my story was over, he wiped his mouth with one of my daisy-covered napkins, downed the rest of his lemonade, and said, "Well then, let's get this drawer open." He made quick work of the stuck drawer, and after searching for only a second, found the notch that slid back the false bottom. I couldn't believe it. The false bottom alone was a stretch, but seeing the letter sitting there in real life, insane. I reached into the drawer and picked up the envelope, my hands trembling just as Edith's had, but for different reasons. The paper was aged, its edges rough and slightly brittle. I turned it over, lifted the flap, and slowly pulled out the lilac-colored paper, careful not to damage it. Hauntingly beautiful. It was clearly handmade, bits of lilac petals pressed between its uneven fibers. Should I open it? I glanced at Jeff. He shrugged. "That's up to you." I wasn't sure. Edith's eyes had been haunted, and while part of me felt like I was meant to open the letter, another part couldn't shake the sadness in her eyes. It lingered, heavy and unsettling. Still, something pulled at me, urging me to open it. Before I even realized what I was doing, I unfolded the letter, top first, then bottom. One single line stretched across the middle of the page. "I wanted to warn you. I was trapped. I am sorry." I read the line again. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I could smell bacon. The room was spinning. My stomach was sick. Somewhere in the distance, Jeff was calling my name, but it was faint, muffled. The air was thick, damp and dank, clinging to my skin like old mildewed laundry left to long in the wash. I couldn't breathe. I closed my eyes and tried to remember my breathing techniques. In for 5, hold for 4, out for 7. Or was it 8? Damn it. But my slow, deep breaths came out rattled. Reaching for the chair, I sank into it, resting my elbows on the table and my head in my hands. If I could just get my thoughts together. All at once, visions of an entire lifetime slammed into me. Emotions crashed through me, too many to name. I felt joy, then sadness, heard laughter, then a baby's first cry. My baby's first cry? But everything was coated in darkness. I opened my eyes. The lilac-colored paper lay on the desk in front of me. Blank. My hand involuntarily moved, picking up a pen from nowhere. My breath was stuck in my throat, as in horror, I watched myself write. I tried to warn you. I was trapped. I am sorry. Sadie, I work all day to put food on this table. You think it's gonna cook itself? Jeff's voice thundered from the top of the staircase, just beyond the door leading into the house. My stomach dropped as a wave of realization hit me so hard I would have fallen if I weren't already sitting. I turned to face the young girl behind me. I already knew she'd be there. My eyes met hers, and I only knew of one way out. With trembling hands and a heart heavy with guilt, I hurriedly stuffed the letter into the envelope. A single tear slipped down my cheek as I whispered, I never should have opened that letter. Runaway bride. Hopping onto a random train in the middle of the night was not the best idea Elise ever had. Not her worst, but a close second to when she was 13 and slept in the library overnight, only to wake up surrounded by cleaning pixies, surrounded by luggage and the smell of old clothes. She shifts her legs to avoid having them fall asleep before the train reaches the next stop. In other carts, there are no doubt people dining and laughing with glasses of champagne in their hands. She wishes she could join them in their revelry, but leaving her hiding space in a torn, dirt-stained wedding dress won't bring her the right sort of attention. Elise only wanted to be sure that no one had altered it without her knowledge, like her mother-in-law-to-be threatened to do when she failed to convince her to wear her gaudy dress from her own wedding. She didn't expect to hear screaming from the adjacent room when she tested how it fit. Glass bottles filled with wine for the guests breaking against the adjoining walls, the cries only stopping at the sound of a sickening thud. Her groom's voice only relieved her for a moment before she heard it discuss where to dispose of the body. She acted on instinct, opening a window and running until she found the train ready to depart. Tears come unbidden after what feels like centuries, thinking of only escape and surviving. Her plans of marrying the man of her dreams are now as broken as her heart. Her eyes grow heavy after her sorrow drains her of tears that further stained her once beautiful white gown. Not even the pain in her blooded feet could keep her awake as adrenaline faded from her body, replaced with exhaustion. Time passes her by as she slept, leaving her ignorant to the moment when the train stops and she's no longer alone. Someone large and strong grabs her, pulling her forward to the point where she nearly falls. Despite her panicked cries, Elise is dragged across the floor, her body already sore from her escape, her limbs unable to move from the mixture of fear and defeat. This is it, my end. They'll take me back to the estate, if not the chapel. My murderous groom will say I'm just a frightened bride with cold feet. And then it will be my body buried somewhere unknown. No one will know I'm missing until I'm nothing but bones. They take her into a train cart filled with people in fancy clothes, tossing her into an empty booth, her head falling against the window, exposing the darkness she used to cover her escape. She doesn't recognize the area behind the glass. Nothing but trees with no sign of human influence. Despite the throbbing in her skull, Elise turns her head to the gawking crowd staring back at her in confusion and horror, their meal interrupted by her unexpected entrance. Only a lone man in a trench coat and wide-brimmed hat has a neutral expression when looking at her. "Is this everyone?" the man asks a uniformed man, the one she assumes brought her here. "Yes, sir. All the passengers are accounted for, and our stowaway." "Any sign of the necklace?" "No, sir." The man in the trench coat sighs in frustration. Elise shrinks into herself as the eyes surrounding her seem to search through her soul. "Who is she?" one whispers. "I don't know. I don't recognize her." "Wait, isn't there a wedding this morning? The Von Gray and Carlyle families, right? It can't be Elise Carlyle. She wouldn't be caught dead in such a state. Besides, why would she be running from her own wedding? They've known each other for years." Elise opens her mouth to explain everything, yet no words would come. Try as she might, the only sound she can make is a strangled cry. The man in the trench coat walks down the small path separating the row of booths, hands behind his back in thought. Everyone else remains where they are, their panicked whispers filling the small space with dread. "Detective, what are your plans?" someone asks. "I already have the train staff searching for the missing jewelry. The conductor is aware of this, and I've informed him to keep the train here until the necklace is found. If the thief wishes to reach Bridgeway, they will have to confess. Otherwise, we'll wait until the local police arrive to interrogate everyone." The chatter rises to frustrated protests. the person who dismissed her identity, a middle-aged woman with a large hat decorated with silk flowers, rose from her seat. "This is preposterous. I have somewhere to be, and being fashionably late isn't an option. If I'm not in the pews at the chapel with the other guests, when the bride walks down the aisle, the shame will ruin my reputation and standing in society." The detective ignores her outburst to write down something in his notepad. The older woman, realizing her declaration failed to sway the detective, reaches for her purse, opening it and searching until she pulls out a hand mirror. Its metal frame shaped into soft vines with glowing stones for flowers. Elise recognizes her seeing mirror as the work of a famous artisan in Bridgeway, the place where the chapel awaited her, and what she once thought would be the start of her new life. The older woman leaves her seat, not making any effort to hide what she's doing from the detective or the other passengers. If he suspects something, he doesn't show it as he eyes the passengers. The older woman finds a small corner with an empty booth, turning her back to the others as she presses the flowers and whispers a few words to connect with another seeing mirror. Elise can only see a flash of light from the mirror before the detective takes position across from her, blocking her view. Care to answer some questions? Elise tries once more to speak. And again, only a sound of pain escapes her lips. The detective's hardened expression shifts slightly as she pretends to write with an invisible pen on the table. "Here, you can use mine. Now, first question. How did you get on the train?" Elise writes down a few words. "Open door. Got on before the train left." "And why did you get on the train?" "Running away. Heard a murder. Groom and groomsmen. Don't know who was killed, but was scared." "Your future husband and his groomsmen killed someone? What else can you tell me?" "Screaming, fighting, glass shattering, silence. Then groom says they need to hide the body." The detective continues to ask her questions, Elise responding with what few words she could conjure from her mind without fear settling in. When the interrogation is over, Elise feels hollow, yet despondent. The detective thanks her for her cooperation, moving on to a passenger in a heavy wool coat. Yet, before he could ask a single question, two things happen at the same time. A uniformed woman enters the train with a necklace of flawless diamonds in hand, and the older woman throws her mirror against the wall. The detective springs into action, reaching the staff member in seconds. The older woman turns her attention to Elise, her expression changing from rage to concern. She approaches Elise while the others are distracted with the reveal of the missing necklace. "You're Elise, aren't you?" Elise nods, hope rising in her chest. "Oh, I should have known." The older woman returns to her snobbish attitude in an instant. "Of course, when I connected to my cousin's mirror, she was certain nothing was the matter, or she would have told me." With this theft of your wedding gift. I worried I would be late, so naturally, I had to give the bride a proper blessing to alleviate the results of my tardiness. And when the mirror was given to the bride, you won't believe who I saw. Did the Von Gray family servants think so little of me that I wouldn't recognize one of them from the times I've spent with their mistress? The dress wasn't even embroidered. She pats Elise's head as if she were a child while it swirls in confusion at the news. Poor thing, forced to play in a foolish man's game. No doubt he believed the veil would hide her identity until the priest declared them husband and wife. No matter, everything will be revealed soon enough. I told my cousin to inform your mother that your groom has a convoluted plan to wed another woman of a lowly station. Once we reach Bridgeway, all will be well. Elise is not certain the older woman's assumptions are correct, but the thought of salvation is enough to set her mind at ease. Once the train resumes its journey, the passengers return to a modicum of normalcy, talking about mundane things as they ate their now cold food. Elise's own appetite returned as she dined with the older woman, as she spoke of the scandal that will erupt once the truth is revealed. With time, the wheels break upon the rails as the station of Bridgeway comes into view. The familiar face of her mother, eyes stained with sorrow, light up once Elise races onto the platform into her warm embrace. Nature or nurture? Sensitive content, serial killers. Nature or nurture? That is the question. Before today, I thought I knew where I stood on the issue. But now, friends, I am not really sure what to think. To give you context, a few weeks ago, after Mother passed, I was finally able to clean out her bedroom. The medical equipment was, of course, quite pristine, but the smell and debris from her glacial demise was simply overwhelming, and it took me days to clear paths in the room. I found the letters in her closet. Even now, it takes me a moment to adjust myself to the mental impact of those pages and pages of her precise Palmer script, describing in the most flowery of language a lifetime of barely requited love. The only mention of me in any of the letters was it, as in, I can get rid of it. My cold, sterile, demanding mother spent decades writing the most passionate and absolutely painful to read, lurid letters to her one-time lover who never once responded. The wrinkled envelopes I found in an old Avon perfume box, each bearing a scarlet ink, return to sender, returned from the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it just preyed on my mind, and I could not get the thoughts out of my head until I took action. Perhaps you may relate to this, perhaps not. So, friends, I eventually found myself in somewhat of a fugue state, an hour into the 2-hour drive up north from Dallas on 75 to US 69, which leads to Penitentiary Street, and then to the Big Mac. a maximum security prison once known for its annual prisoner rodeo. Now infamous for its terrible conditions, riots, and death row prisoners, one of whom could be my father. To visit anyone at the Big Mac takes some time. Visiting someone like Louis Landry Reese takes time, and one's absolute forbearance for the most intimately probing of questions and fingers. It wouldn't surprise me if you hadn't heard of Louis Landry Reese and his swath of known and unknown rapes, kidnappings, and killings. But you will be able to find all you want with a few searches. Maybe you know exactly who he is. Driving under the peeling, white-arched grille Oklahoma State Penitentiary sign, buttressed by decaying, similarly painted white bricks pillars, I pulled into one of the few designated parking spots for Big Mac visitors. I turned off the Volvo's engine and sat for a moment, perhaps a bit longer than a moment, with my mind ticking to different thoughts about how maybe today I would finally learn who my father really was, about how Mother would never talk about him, about how she would punish me when I kept asking and asking, and about how Brandy, my old receptionist, would tease me about Volvos being only for short-haired women who shopped at Home Depot. After a bit, the rising sun. Visitors to the Big Mac must arrive very early. Warmed up the air in the car to the point my face began prickling with sweat, and I was brought back from my reminiscing. I opened the door, swung my legs out, and made my way to enter the prison. As I mentioned, the passage from our daily world to that of people such as Louis Landry Reese is rife with probing exams, delays, and grunting guards who entertain themselves with snickering under the breath asides. In the Shawshankian depths of the Big Mac, the black and blue rayon bulk that was my escorting guard halted at metal door exactly like the dozen we had already passed. He turned back toward me and asked without much concern, "Are you sure?" It is true, friends. I am not a physically intimidating person. Not tall, not wide, not much hair, nor chin. With my decidedly pointed nose and very small teeth, Mother thought it the height of ironic hilarity that I chose the dental profession. A squealing mouse is what she called me, although, to be fair, I learned at a very young age that squealing, no matter how much pain or discomfort, only prolonged such experiences. So squealing is something I have not done in a very long time. I stood straight and focused on how I was a respected professional, how I would be walking out of this dank hellhole of sweating brick and would never ever return, while Louis Landry Reese would only leave feet first. How I would finally find out the truth. "Open the door," I whispered. Greasy tendrils of hair leaked from his scalp, down his shiny face onto pale, meaty forearms, creating a tangled and ripped curtain through which I could see a silver blue eye cutting from me to the closing door of the room and back to me. As the door shut, he lifted his head up, and I was absolutely shocked to see his sunken and caved face with a navel of puckered mouth. Lewis Landry Reese had no teeth, literally. Then I heard the strangest sound, like a dog choking and barking at the same time. It was me, laughing hysterically. Lewis Landry Reese did not appreciate my levity. Friends, not at all. He tried to stand, but the chains around his wrist went through a steel loop, bolted to the table, kept him stooped over as he shouted at me. The harsh ratcheting sound of the chains sawing back and forth through the loop assaulted my ears almost as much as his gummy-mouthed curses. The whole episode lasted only a few moments before a phalanx of guards rushed into the room, with one picking me physically up and setting me outside. To be frank, I do not really remember much too clearly from that point. I numbly followed the uniform in front of me and fuzzily collected my belongings before staggering into the Oklahoma sun. I made my way to the Volvo and began the drive back to Dallas. The shrieked words of my father still ricocheting between my ears, and he was indeed my father. One look at his face and those colorless, watery blue eyes that were identical to my own left no doubt, at least to me. I think Lewis Landry Reese thought so too, even though he screamed the most terrible things about Mother and how I was just a dentist and not like the others, which is why I was so stunned and really driving on remote control until I got back to Dallas and pulled off Harry Hines into my driveway. The implications of Lewis Landry Reese knowing my occupation meant he knew of me. But what did he know about me? I was thinking this over as I went to the basement to check on Brandy. She had finally stopped trying to pull her wrists from the restraints, but it seemed she had really stopped doing much of anything. Even when I clicked the pliers together, she barely trembled. That was disappointing. But since Brandy was down to her last 3 teeth, 16, 24, and 41, it was probably time to discharge her and find my next patient. I tell you all this, friends, because contrary to the rantings of Lewis Landry Reese, I am not just a dentist. I am the dentist. And Lewis Landry Reese also said the others. So, I am posting my story on this dark website as a message in the bottle to see if maybe I have family, others like me, to ask, what do you think, nature or nurture? Epitaphs to Elsa, September 8th, 1986. Elsa, it's just me now. Just me and the waves. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I just want to believe you can still hear me. The boat is quiet without you. I keep thinking I'll hear your footsteps in the cabin. That soft little shuffle you made when you didn't want to wake me. But I know better. You're not here, and I did that. I miss you. God, I miss you. You never should have stayed with me, Elsa. You should have let me rot the moment you saw what I was becoming. But you never ran. Not when the hunger started. Not when my skin came apart. Not even when you saw what I would do. You should have run. You saw it. That thing inside me. It doesn't care what I want. It doesn't care how much I fight. I don't want to remember them, but I do. That old fisherman just happened to be in the wrong place. He looked me in the eye and knew something was wrong. I saw the way his face tightened before he turned to run. It didn't matter. It happened too fast, and he split apart like a red, stained driftwood after they reached him. I didn't want to hurt any of them, but you know what I am, and you know the worst of it. The only thing in this world that can kill me. Water. The sea, the rain, even a goddamn puddle. You said it was poetic, that all we needed to do was wash the sins away, and that would be it. I wish I could tell you I'm sorry and have that be enough, but I know that it isn't. My mind is slipping. I thought I heard you earlier, but when I turned, there was nothing but the water. I can feel it starting to itch beneath my skin again. I must attend to its needs until morning. Leon. September 2nd, 1986. Leon. I woke up from a terrible dream and could not tell where I was, nor even when I was. For the longest time, I thought I was still in our cabin, with the warped floorboards and the leaky window that rattled in the wind. I thought I heard the waves outside, but they were too far away. I sat up and reached for something, but there was nothing. No warmth, no weight, just a hollow feeling. And then I remembered you. I used to think I could live in your shadow forever, that it was enough to stand between you and the world, to hide what you had become from those who would have tried to take you from me. But you never really belonged to me. You belonged to it. I fed you. I kept you safe and suffered with you. And still, in the end, you left me here. I think I was angry. I still might be. You say you miss me, that you never wanted this, that you never wanted them to die. I believe you. You don't have to look for me. I'm already here. Elsa. September 9th, 1986. Afternoon. Elsa, this isn't real. You're not real. I don't know what kind of madness has settled into my head, but I know what I saw. There is no one on this boat. I searched every inch, Elsa. Every cabin, every hatch. There aren't even footprints, not a single sign that anyone but me has been here. And yet, your letter was waiting for me, in the same place I left mine, in your handwriting. Exactly your handwriting. Where are you? What do you mean you're already here? No. No, I won't do this. I won't chase ghosts. I won't let my brain rot on the deck of this damned boat, waiting for another letter to appear out of nowhere. Not when I can still feel the scars where it broke through my skin last night. Raw, burning. Until I fed it with something I brought on board. I'll leave this here for you, if only to prove to myself that I'm not completely unraveling. Maybe a drink will help. Leon, September 2nd, 1986. Leon, I can't see the sunset the way I used to, but I know you can. You always liked that time of day best. As the light faded over the horizon, the world softening, I remember watching you, even after you changed. I wanted to believe that if I just held on to you long enough, you would come back to me. I thought love could keep you human. Do you remember what you are, who you have become? You remember the killing, but not the hunger. Do you recall what happened before I died? You used to say that the sea was patient, that it takes its time, wearing things down piece by piece until all that's left is what it chooses to keep. You think you're drifting, waiting to decide how this ends. But you're wrong. You will never truly die here. Not unless you sink. Elsa, September 9th, 1986. Sunset. Elsa, you dated your letter September 2nd. I don't know what kind of joke this is. If this is my mind breaking, or if this is actually you, or if there's no difference anymore. But I know that date. That's the day after you died, and I killed you. I need to say it. I need to write it. I need to stop hiding from it like a coward, because I remember now. I remember the way you looked at me when you realized what I had become. I remember you tried to save me, tried to save them. I remember the knife in your hand and the tears in your eyes when you begged me to just let it end. I remember that you weren't fast enough. I remember the way you screamed when I touched you, the way your body turned to ruin beneath my hands, the way you stopped fighting when you knew there was nothing left to fight for. I remember the moment you stopped being afraid of me. I remember everything, Elsa, and you were right. I am not human anymore. You said the sea is patient, but so is the thing inside me. It waits. It watches. It lets me write these letters like I still have control, like I still have a choice, like I could ever truly leave this boat. But I know better now. I know what I have to do. This time, I'll finish what you started. Leon, September 3rd, 1986. Leon, you stayed up waiting for me, didn't you? You always used to do that when we were kids. You'd sit up by the window, refusing to sleep, until I came back inside. I used to think it was sweet. Now I think maybe you always knew, even before you became this, that you were meant to be alone. I see now that I should have left you alone too, but I stayed and cleaned up after you, wiped their blood from your body, covered for you. Every time that thing leaked out from beneath your skin, I thought I was protecting you, but I wasn't. I was keeping the monster alive, and that's why you killed me. You can stop pretending now. You remember everything. I tried to end it before it could spread. I would have done it if you'd let me. You should have let me. Instead, you turned on me. You let it break me apart, like all the others. You wept and rocked what was left of me, like I was still yours. Like I hadn't just died in your arms, and in some twisted way, maybe I am still yours. But that doesn't matter now. You have one thing left to do. Come visit me where I am now. That is the right thing to do. Love, your sister, Elsa. September 10th, 1986. Elsa, yes, you know me best. I stayed up all night waiting for you. I watched the page, scotch in hand, eyes burning. I wouldn't sleep, not until I caught you in the act and saw how you did it. But I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes, your letter was there, and your last words shattered me. You were my sister, my only sister. You were always there, watching over me, covering for me. You loved me when no one else could, and God damn it, Elsa, I loved you too. We were alone, together, for so long. Maybe that's why it happened. Maybe that's how we fell into something we shouldn't have. Maybe that's why you still stayed after I changed. Why you still brought them to me. I never asked you to do it, but I never stopped you either. And now I see why. Because I was happy. I was happy when you fed me. I was happy when you lied for me, covered for me, hid me. I was happy when you were the only one in the world who saw me for what I was, and still stayed. And I thought that was enough, but you knew better. You knew that as long as I was out here, I wasn't just Leon. I was it. I was the thing that wears me, the thing that spreads itself through my hands, my mouth, my breath. You knew what had to be done, and I stopped you. And now I have to finish it. Elsa, after reading your last letter, I tried something. I let the water touch me. Just a few drops at first. Just enough to test what you told me. And I watched my own skin blacken. I watched it peel away, curl like burnt paper, dust scattering into nothing. And for the first time since that night, I felt something leave me. Something I can never let return. I know what I have to do now. I should have done it a long time ago. I'll see you soon, Elsa. Leon. September 15th, 1986. Radio transmission. U.S. Coast Guard Channel. So 8:42 a.m. EST. Yeah, this is Patrol 6 out of Newport, responding to a distress call. We've located the vessel approximately 17 nautical miles offshore, drifting. No signs of life on board. Copy. Unintelligible reply. Copy. Yeah. We're boarding now. The name on the hull matches the missing vessel reported out of Washington last week. Belonged to one Leon Mathers. Yeah. The suspect in the Olympia killings. Still no sign of a body. Over. Hang on. Christ. Do you smell that? Muffled voices. Jesus. It's in the fog. Thick as hell. The air. God, it's like it's sticking to my skin. Unintelligible reply. Boats in rough shape. Some flooding in the lower cabin, but no visible damage. No sign of struggle. Looks like it's just been out here drifting. There's a letter on the table. Several, actually. We've got personal effects. ID matching Mathers. A sudden, sharp breath. Shit. No body. No trace of him. But we found part of someone. It's a leg. Left, severed mid-thigh. Not clean. No ID yet. Yeah, we'll check the water next. Shuffling, movement. The soft slosh of waves lapping against the hull. Oh, hell. Sir, you need to hear this part. Listen, there's something in the water. Around the boat. Not oil, not debris. It's dark. Black as ink. Looks like it's mixed with the waves, but it's thicker. Like it's trying to hold its shape. God, it's moving. No, I'm serious. It's bubbling. It's a pause, a quick breath. Alive. Chunks in it. Carbon, maybe. But some of them, another sharp breath. Some of them are floating against the current. A quiet, shaken voice in the background. It's watching. Sir? Orders? Unintelligible reply. Collecting samples now. We'll tow the vessel back to port. End transmission. The whisper in the city. The dark skeletons of skyscrapers stretched into the twilight sky. I trudged along an empty street, my feet dragging through the damp sand, leaving deep grooves behind me. How long had I been here? I couldn't tell. The overcast horizon was slowly growing lighter, the mist thinning with each passing moment. The street seemed familiar to me, but any landmarks that might have been here before were completely effaced now. Everything around me was falling apart, disintegrating into sand that covered every inch of the ground. Suddenly, a soft, faint whisper came from somewhere in the distance. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen anyone else in this desolate place, so I shuffled toward the sound. The voice came again, this time a little closer and more insistent, but I still couldn't make out the words or pinpoint where it was coming from. I tried to pick up my pace, but the sand was dense and viscous between my toes. The whisper kept calling, getting clearer, as though someone was tuning a radio. It was soothing, but firm. I sensed it wished me no harm, at least as long as I did what it told me to. Finally, I understood what it was saying. Come on, just a little bit further, the voice urged. It seemed like it was coming from a building to my right. I stared into the shadows in the gaping doorway that led into a dark hall. Nobody was there. I caught a reflection in one of the grimy shards of glass jutting from a window frame. Was it me? It couldn't be. How could I be this old and shriveled? I turned away and wandered toward the low horizon. "We need to get ready. Somebody is coming," the voice called from up ahead. A warm rain suddenly began to fall. It frothed in my hair and trickled down my cheeks. The air filled with a strange scent, something fresh and sweet. It didn't seem right. Rain shouldn't smell like that. The voice kept coaxing me forward, and I kept on wading through fragrant sheets of rain, my feet squelching in the soggy sand. After a while, the rain stopped, and the sky cleared a little, though the sun was still hidden behind the thick veil of clouds. The lukewarm mist curled around every turn, filling the streets that branched out from the crossroads I passed. If only it were clear enough to see what lay in the distance. Maybe then I could remember. Just as I reached the next junction, the whisper gave me a new command. "All right, let's get something to eat. Come on now. Turn here." I looked from side to side. Across the road to my left stood the remains of a diner. I plodded toward the building through the endless sand. I thought there couldn't possibly be anything to eat here. But as I stumbled over the threshold, I caught a whiff of toast and coffee. The diner was as decayed as everything else in this city. There was less sand inside than on the street, but it still covered the floor with an even layer. The display counter stood empty, the glass shattered. Here and there, overturned furniture lay scattered across the ground. The upholstery on the chairs and benches had rotted away a long time ago. The cup-shaped clock on the wall was missing its hands. Decay, dust, and sand. There was no one inside. Still, I heard muted whispers coming from every corner, buzzing like cicadas on a summer night. I moved through the room, trying to make out what the voices were saying, but there were just too many of them now. I shuffled through the jumbled chairs and tables to the center of the room. Here, on one of the tables, sat a plate of food and a cup of coffee. My stomach rumbled. There were no utensils, so I grabbed the food with my hands, stuffing it into my mouth. The toast was crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. The omelet was fluffy and creamy. The coffee was strong and sweet. How long had it been since I had last eaten anything? I wasn't sure. It felt like ages. Suddenly, the air around me shimmered as though in a heat haze. The dilapidated diner faded away, and I found myself in a warm, sunlit kitchen. Light wood furniture, a crisp tablecloth, plates with delicate flower patterns on the rim. A woman stood in front of the stove. Her hair fell in neat waves, and she wore a light blue fit and flare dress. She turned to me and smiled. "Georgie, would you like another piece of toast?" she asked. Was she talking to me? Was that my name? I wanted to ask her what was going on, but before I could find the words, the mirage disappeared. I was back in the decaying diner, an empty plate before me. "Okay, George, You're done? Let's go now, the whisper cooed. I followed the voice back into the street. It kept urging me forward with its bright, incessant tone. Well, at least now I knew my name. But all the other questions still whirled in my head. What did the voice want from me? Where was I going? How long had I been here? Who was I? Really, it felt like this mess in my head would boil over, washing away all this dirty sand and all the debris of this dead city. I gritted my teeth, clenched my fists, and plowed forward. At last, the road led me to a park. Patches of grass poked through the sand. The trees, covered in yellow and red leaves, peeked through the fog, taunting me. A path lined with benches led into the mist. All right, let's sit down here. I settled onto the nearest bench. Quiet fragments of music fluttered to me from somewhere far away. The sound was comforting, familiar. The voice hummed around me for a moment before fading into the background. The music grew louder and steadier. I thought I recognized the melody, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. It reminded me of someone I used to miss. I sat alone, enveloped by the soothing blanket of music, staring at the colorful trees before me. Bit by bit, my angst and frustration melted away. After a while, I heard the whispers again. The voice that had been guiding me was talking to somebody else now. The new voice seemed familiar, like I'd heard it sometime long ago, in another life. I felt a movement in the air beside me. Someone touched my hand. Dad? Dad, it's me.
Child.
The small room was tidy and clean. As nice as a room in such a facility could be. The curtains were open, and you could see a small park colored in gold and red by the approaching cold. An old jazz standard was flowing from the player in the corner. A woman sat on a stool beside an armchair where an old, frail man rested. She held his hand. "I'm sorry, Miss Ross. He's not having a good day today," a nurse said gently from behind the armchair. To be honest, they're few and far between now, and it's hard to say how many more he'll have. I know, but it's still so hard. It's like he's wandering further and further away, the woman said, wiping the corner of her eye. Dad, it's Katie. I'm here." His dry, thin fingers tightened around hers. The angst of Antilla. "Tell me the truth. Where are you from?" Yannick roared, leader of the Goobies, a notorious, nomadic southern desert clan. In his teepee kneeled a young woman bound by the ankles and wrists. She wore a dirty, white satin tunic and breeches. Her brunette hair escaped from under her sand-dusted headscarf. Around her tired eyes, a darkened mixture of sand and sweat stuck to her skin. Other than that, the rest of her face remained untouched. Inside the teepee stood a few wooden chests and a bed of dried rushes wrapped in linen. A lantern sat next to the bed, and about 4 woven ra covered the desert floor. A leather bag lay across the floor, next to the woman. Through the crack of the entrance, stars could be seen, twinkling in the inky darkness of the desert sky, stretching out towards the far horizon. A slight chill wisped its way inside and curled around the room. Besides the faint talk of those in the surrounding tents, only the crackle of the rushes burning in the lantern could be heard. "I've said too much," the woman murmured. Yannick slapped her across the face. Her head snapped sideways, the red sting blooming across her cheek. Slowly, she turned back to face Yannick, trembling with rage. She glared at him, her blazing eyes drilling unsettlingly into his soul. Yannick took a step back. The wrinkles on his forehead loosened as frustration turned to shock. "No way. This can't be," he whispered, feeling his stomach drop. He lowered to one knee to face her. He had to confirm what he was seeing. He let out a sharp sigh of disbelief. His eyes weren't fooling him. "How?" he asked her. She continued to shoot daggers at him, remaining quiet. "How?" he repeated. "How what?" she spat. "Amber." Your eyes turned amber. She broke eye contact with Yannick and stared blankly at the reed-woven floor. Her eyes flickered back to a deep shade of brown. Yannick shuddered as he felt a sudden chill leave his bones. "Tell me I'm wrong when I say that you're from Antilla," Yannick said, holding his breath. The woman shut her eyes and sighed. "Tell me!" he roared impatiently. She looked up at him again, amber flickering faintly through her pupils. A coldness instantly rushed over him again. "You're not wrong. I am from Antilla." Yannick exhaled sharply, falling backwards to sit on the floor. He crossed his legs and ran one hand through his hair. "H. How is it possible? How did you survive?" he questioned in a softer tone. "Untie me, then I'll tell you," she hissed, her menacing amber gaze burning into Yannick. "You have some nerve. Then let my secrets remain untold," she jeered, narrowing her eyes. Her lip curled slightly. Yannick scoffed before getting up. He walked over to her leather bag and threw it angrily behind him, out of the woman's reach. He reached down, lifted the end of his robe, and took a sharp dagger from a tight piece of cloth wrapped around his ankle. He kneeled behind the woman and started to cut away at her restraints. She rolled her shoulders and stretched her neck the moment she was free. She stood up briefly, stretching her legs, and before sitting back down with her legs crossed. Yannick kept his eyes locked on her, dagger in hand, before he sat down again. "Thank you," she said, with a slight nod. "I will tell you how I managed to make it out alive from Antilla. But it will not help you, nor will it bring any peace to this situation. It will only quench your curiosity." "A favor for a favor," Yannick said, twisting his knife from the blade's tip. "Very well." The woman dug deep into her mind to try to resurface the day she made it out of Antilla. The memories came flooding back in an instant. Tonight, a distant star will die. It will explode into blues and pinks and purples, Kira said, bursting with excitement. And how do you know this? I said, crossing my arms. Kira had a vivid imagination. We never knew if what she was saying was fact or something she had created in her head. Next to the North Star last night, I noticed one of the stars getting dimmer and dimmer until it disappeared. It was always there. I had it plotted on my star map. I waited for a long time, but it never came back. This lines up with the legend of Nara, Thomas interrupted. The legend that described Nara Envith witnessing the night sky, illuminating in an unfathomable display. The disappearance of a star followed by a cascade of colors, painting the night sky. Thomas leaned against one of the cobblestone walls of a side street in the market square of Antilla. The three teens were hidden in a corner of the square, watching the passers-by. The city was bustling with Antillian traders and foreign folk. Horses with small wooden carts clicked along the uneven cobblestone roads surrounding the square. The stalls were propped up in the center, interested customers weaving their way in and out of them. Bursts of vibrant colors decorated the city, from vivid Antillian woven silk to collections of earthy sienna spices from the south. A preacher suddenly emerged from the crowds and took a stand at the city's gathering point next to where we were chatting. He instantly drew the attention of the market-goers. His brown hair was scraggly, and his cheeks wore a crimson flush. His sweaty, cream tunic adhered to his skin and was half stuffed into the top of his black breeches. His chest heaved dramatically as he gasped for air. "We need to make peace with the brethren of Tuiga," he shouted, trying to regain his breath. "They will come, and they will not stop unless we equalize the trade in the north. The rulers of Antilla are setting us up to die. Open your eyes, people. The brethren are coming." The city guards swiftly appeared and hauled the man off the gathering point. A few of his passionate followers preached behind him, throwing their fists in the air in frustration as he was dragged away into the teeming crowds. Quickly, a bard stood up, seizing the unoccupied podium, curating songs of mockery about the preacher. He quickly gained a laughing audience. "Well, do you want to join me on my search tonight?" Kira toothily smiled, oblivious to the scenes around her. Thomas and I exchanged looks. We knew that meant camping on the roof of her steading till early hours of the morning in the freezing cold. "It's a bit chilly, don't you think, Priscilla?" Thomas asked, raising his eyebrows. I agree. Besides, my parents would not appreciate it if I were to fall ill." I get it, Kira grumbled. "But just know that you are missing the chance to watch a legend be reborn. The legend of Kira. Thomas and I rolled our eyes. We spent some time browsing the market stalls for any interesting items we could buy with our measly 5 silver coins. To our avail, we found nothing. Once the vendors began disassembling their stalls, we headed home for dinner. The foreign merchants made their way to their respective inns, weary from the long day. The concealed stars slowly emerged into the darkened sky, and a cold air settled over the city. Merchants drank into the early hours, while children drifted to sleep. Wrapped in woolen blankets, I woke up to the frantic banging of Kira's mother on our front door in the dark of night. "Hurry! Hurry! Wake up!" she screamed. My dad rushed to the door. My mother's footsteps could be heard running to the kitchen. In the background, I could hear the petrified voice of Kira's mother explaining to my father, "The brethren are coming." Kira saw them crescenting the hills from the south. "We don't have much time. We need to leave before they get here. There are thousands of them." Without a moment's hesitation, my dad came storming into my room. "What's happening?" I asked. He grabbed my arm and dragged me off my bed without a word. My mother was waiting at the door with a lantern. In the span of a few minutes, buildings had been set alight, and screams could be heard echoing through the city from the outer walls. We ran through the streets, trying to avoid soldiers and other screaming townsfolk, hoping to make it to the north of the city before the soldiers got there. But it was no use. We were surrounded. "Priscilla, you need to listen to me," my dad said sternly. He kneeled down to face me and placed his hands firmly on my shoulders. "Those carts by the city walls will soon be leaving. You need to climb under one and grab on. Do not let go. Do you hear me? Do not let go. You need to get out of here. We love you so much. We will come find you. Go. Be safe, my dear." Tears spilled down his cheeks, illuminating in the fire's blaze. "Dad, go!" I did what I was told. I ran to a horse and carriage next to one of the burning buildings by the city's outer wall. Before I went under, I looked back, hoping to see my parents to say my final goodbyes. But they had vanished. I climbed under the large carriage and held on to the wooden foundations. I wrapped the top of my feet behind another plank of wood. It only took a minute or so before a couple came running in a panic and climbed into the carriage. "Hurry!" the woman screamed as her partner leaped inside, closing the door behind him. A coachman jumped onto the front of the cart and instantly got the horse in a gallop. The cart moved quickly out of the city, cobblestone streets changing to rough dirt roads. We turned occasionally until we were headed for the south. As we moved further away, the stillness of the cold, airy night echoed the distant, muffled screams escaping from Antilla. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but a cry could not form. I didn't know if I would ever see my family or friends again. My whole world had changed in a heartbeat. My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the jolt of the cart coming to a stop. I heard the neigh of a distant horse and footsteps approaching the carriage. There was a sudden gurgling as the swish of an arrow flew through the air. There was a splintering of wood, and a sudden force pushed the carriage backwards. The coachman's horse neighed, its nostrils flaring as it pulled against its reins, hooves scraping against the ground. The footsteps neared the cart until I could see the feet of what I could only guess was a soldier. The soldier walked to the carriage door and swung it open. Those inside screamed in fear before the man silenced their petrified cries with a pierce of a sword. The blood in their throats gurgled and spluttered for a few seconds, their bodies jerking and flailing in the carriage before they fell still. My lungs screamed for air. My heart was racing in my chest. The soldier dragged the bodies out of the cart and threw them on the ground with a thump. Their heads bounced off the soil. Two sets of lifeless eyes stared blankly at me from the dirt floor. The woman's gown and the man's tunic were drenched in blood, and they had huge gaping wounds for necks. I felt my palms get sweaty and my grip loosening. "Don't let go, Priscilla. Don't let go." I told myself. I felt a sudden heat and heard a crackle of wood. The carriage had been set alight. I turned my head frantically, trying to find the feet of the murderer. Instead, 4 hooves galloped alongside the carriage and headed in the direction of Antilla. I wanted to wait until I couldn't hear the thunder of hooves anymore before letting go. Instead, the fumes of burning wood engulfed my lungs, and the hiss of flames dancing in the wind deafened the soldier's departure. The fire closed under the carriage. The sweat on my hands was as slippery as oil. My body burned, sweat grabbing onto my hair and the fabric of my clothes. The roaring flames licked off my exposed skin as they surrounded me. It was then I let go. I scurried out from under the carriage, staying low. I looked cautiously around, but saw nothing. I carefully moved away from the cart, pulling myself along the ground with my forearms and pushing myself with my feet. My heart pounded in my chest. I had to keep going. I had to be brave. A forest lay ahead. Through the mud and reeds, I finally made it to where the grass met the tree line. I got up on one knee, attempting to stay low, wiping the sweat from my forehead on my ashy linen shirt. I tried to regain my breath. I looked back at Antilla, the burning carriage collapsing in the corner of my eye. The city was being swallowed by the fire. I could make out hundreds upon thousands of more soldiers marching their way to the stone walls of my city. Their huge war band stretched into the distance, further than the eye could see. A harrowing pain of grief shot through me, each quivering breath a battle against the burning agony in my chest. Before I could process anything, the sound of soldiers on horses re-emerged from my left. Without thinking, I ran. I ran into the forest, never looking back. I had lost everything that day. There has ever been a more notorious massacre than the massacre of Antilla. There were no survivors, except for me. Yanuk shook his head in disbelief. "Are you ready?" he asked. "For what?" Yanuk stood up and outstretched his hand to regain the north. Priscilla blinked at him in bewilderment. They did not only steal Antilla. The Brethren banished us nomads from our territories, leaving us stateless in the south. They are trying to rule over all the sacred lands. We shall not let that happen. We are going to fight. We will take back what is rightfully ours. Are you in? Priscilla hesitated for a moment. The bottled anger boiled her blood. A fiery passion burst in the pit of her stomach, longing to gain revenge for her friends, her family, her home. She looked up at Yanuk, eyes burning with an igniting amber. Priscilla nodded and took Yanuk's hand. She was ready to fight. 2 monsters, Anatolius's home, had been destroyed. Apart from the crackling of fires, still eagerly munching at the dregs of what used to be beautiful greenery, the island was silent. Anatolius might not have noticed the army behind him, were he marching on an adjacent kingdom. This kingdom, his kingdom, had been razed. Every home they passed was either a pile of ashes or the blackened husk of a stone wall. Anatolius pressed on. Nepheli had to be okay. She'd been alone with Anacreon for 6 years. He still had to apologize for that. He remembered the linen sheets she'd wrapped around their boy as she carried him. The boy with her blue eyes and the golden hair Anatolius himself had been born with. Hair that would by now be darkening to a soft brown. He'd been looking forward to catch up with them, with the goings-on of the kingdom, with the childhood he'd missed out on. As they walked through the town, he heard several of his men cry out. The sounds of weapons dropping to the stone roads and the sound of feet racing off. Several corpses dotted the paths. Most were burned beyond recognition, but a few wore helms bearing a crest that had been melted by the heat. None of his men, of course. Some army that had sacked the place. But some didn't wear armor. Anatolius was trying not to think about that. He had to see to Nepheli first. He had to. His sandal hit an uneven patch of stone in the path, and he stopped. Behind him, the sounds of his army rustled to a stop. No, he stumbled forward, the dying light of the day casting long shadows that blended with the soot-blackened stone, as if to trick him into thinking that it was supposed to look like this. The courtyard was in disarray. The once beautiful gardens that Nephili had so meticulously tended to were reduced to cinders. The 2 cypress trees at its entrance, little more than stumps. A bench lay in a heap of broken stone. The doors, at first glance, were open, though taking another trembling step forward, Anatolius realized there was no door in the hollow mouth leading into what was once his home. "Sir," Anatolius jumped. He'd thought most of the men had run off, seeing to their own homes, but Theodoros stood behind him, standing to attention. His eyes were hard, as if he were pretending to be blind to the destruction. Theodoros had fled his home, a country to the south, one with gods like Niam and Anansi, rather than Zeus and Hermes. He remembered helping the man out of a shipwreck when they were boys, making a comment about being surprised he'd survived the wrath of Charybdis, and realizing the boy couldn't understand his words. He didn't even have the language to tell Anatolius his name. Theodoros was the name they'd given him in Liu, and the name that had stuck. Apart from Anatolius, he didn't really have a family here. "Theo," he said, stepping forward. He'd intended to make it a long, confident stride, but his foot skidded in the ash and rubble. "You don't have to see this." "I must," he said. His eyes grew soft as he regarded his king. "If only to keep you on your feet." Anatolius frowned at him, then took a deep breath and nodded. He ducked into the doorway. The humble palace was illuminated by a wide hole in the wall, breaching through the ceiling of the upper floor. The smell of charred flesh, stale after days of abandonment, still hung faintly in the air. Anatolius pulled up his cloak to cover his nose. "There could be survivors," he said doubtfully. "Check the cellars. Someone could have hidden there from the fire. I'll go check my bedchambers." Theodoros opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, giving his king a nod. He ducked into the kitchen and disappeared from view. Anatolius put one foot on the bottom step, taking a deep breath to steel himself, regretting it immediately as the odors seemed to coagulate in his nostrils. He readjusted his cloak about his nose and headed up the stairs, dreading what he'd find at the top. They could still live, he tried to reassure himself. If they're not up here, Theo might find them in the cellar. Perhaps Anacreon was hiding between the wine barrels when they came. He paused on the steps. They? Who was they? The city had been burnt to the ground intentionally. There were dead soldiers among the townspeople. But who on earth would have this big a problem with him? He almost turned around to go find one of those dead soldiers and examine the corpse more thoroughly. But he shook his head and took another step up. "Don't distract yourself," as his words echoed in the still air. He froze. The sound of something rustling in the rooms overhead were distinct now. A scuttling of feet and fabric. Someone was here. One hand on the hilt of his xiphus, he charged up the stairs. It could be Nepheli, but it could be someone else entirely. He threw his shoulder through the remains of the door, barging into his rooms amid a shower of soot. He then froze. His chambers, now a single room with the walls burned or knocked over, were destroyed. He shook his head, refusing to let himself be distracted by the destruction, and turned to the bed. Their bed. His blood ran cold. Nepheli, thin and gaunt, staring at him in disbelief and fear, lay in the bed. At first, he thought she must be tied there, with how little she moved. But as she lifted her trembling hand, he realized she was simply too weak. With effort, she outstretched a finger to point at him. No, not at him. Behind him, he spun in one fluid motion, drawing his sword. Initially, he saw nothing but the darkened corner of the room, blackened by shadows and soot. Then a low, dark chuckle echoed, and two glowing pinpricks of red appeared from the void, and here I was, half expecting her to die before you arrived, said a smooth voice, a shape separating itself from the shadows and resolving into a strange figure. It stepped forward, some kind of humanoid relative of Chimera, Anatolius thought. Its legs were smooth, dark red, scaled things, talons clinking on the stone floor between the tattered remnants of a pelt, the long, thin end of a reptilian tail whipped around. The figure's face remained in shadow, apart from its eyes, but Anatolius could just make out the shape of their head, adorned with wicked horns that swept back and arched up into points like some cruel wave. "Who are you?" he demanded in horror. "Not what?" The being chuckled, bringing a hand up to rest on their hip. It had those same dark red scales, same hooked black talons, clashing with the clean white of the creature's exomus. Most people ask me, what? I've had many of these conversations, King. Yet you're the first to ask after my identity first. I'll commend you on that. I know what you are. You're a monster. You brought your army here to destroy my people, and I will know why. Speak. The figure, infuriatingly, remained still. Another chuckle rumbling in their chest. Anatolius could practically hear Nepheli's bones vibrating as she trembled in fear or exhaustion, perhaps both. What had this thing done to her? "It's quite close to dark," they said, drawing his attention back. "Are you certain you want to strike now? What's that supposed to mean?" He shot back. One more dark chuckle. One more tremulous heartbeat. The sun was barely a blood-stained sliver cresting the windowsill. Then it was gone, the light dying from the room. The figure swept toward him. Only his reflexes saved him, his foot swinging out as he pivoted, trying to catch the creature unawares. The first thing Anatolius had learned in war was that a soldier's sword wasn't his only weapon. An instant later, he was staring at the ceiling through star-clouded eyes, wheezing for breath. The creature's tail tip unwound from his ankle, and the thing stepped over to look down at him. A silver grin cracking the violet dusk light. "You should have gotten her and gotten out," they said, and lunged down at him. Cat. Pain greeted him as he woke. Head muddled, he groaned, reaching up to rub at a crick in his neck. A hand grabbed his wrist, and he cursed under his breath. "That thing, let go!" The words, though attempted to be forceful, came out as a pained hiss. He glared up at the figure above him, reaching for his sword. A moment later, he realized it wasn't the thing from earlier, but a more familiar face. Theodoros. Anatolius relaxed. What happened? Theodoros loosened his grip on his wrist, readjusting to help Anatolius sit up. There was a pain in his eyes, Anatolius realized. Or was it guilt? He shook his head to clear it, feeling a lot like he was nursing a hangover without having drunk the wine. "I am sorry, Your Majesty." Anatolius looked around the room. It was still in the same disheveled state as before, only now a huddled mass lay on the ground beside him. The creature, he realized. Its tail was still coiled lightly around his leg, but it lay in a puddle of blood. And Anatolius realized with shock that the sword whose handle he'd been reaching for was buried in its chest. Looking over the thing now, it seemed so much smaller, so much less imposing. He could see its face clearly now. Nearly human, but for a dusting of crimson scales across its cheeks. Had they been that bright before? Or had he been imagining it in the distorting shadows of the encroaching night that collected in patches around the outside corners of its hollow silver eyes, framing its face? It was a woman, too. More sets of horns studding her jawline, almost like facial hair. Her mouth hung open, revealing a set of fangs whose tips were dipped in blood. Anatolius reached up again, and this time Theodoros didn't stop him as he reached for that crick in his neck. No, not a crick, he realized, hissing in pain as his fingertips brushed a set of puncture wounds. "This thing, what is it?" he asked as he dropped his hand, looking up at his friend. Theodoros shook his head. He didn't know. Anatolius stood, feeling dizzy and weak as he got to his feet. He looked over to the bed, toward the unmoving lump under the sheets. Theodoros got up, but if his intent was to help, He moved too late, as Anatolius stumbled to the side of the bed and fell to his knees beside it. His wife, her once beautiful face now sunken in and bloodless, stared with dead eyes back at him. He reached up with trembling hands, one hand cupping her cheek, the other reaching for her hand. It was still outstretched, with the pointer finger out. She must have used the last of her strength to try and warn me, he thought, leaning up to kiss her forehead as tears collected in his eyes. Without looking up, he said, "Where is my son?" Theodoros was silent for a long moment. "I found him in the cellars," he finally said. "Dead? The smoke must have killed him." Theodoros usually sounded stern. Even in battle, he'd never cracked. But he loved Anatolius's family just as much as he himself did. And now, their loss had broken something in him. If the pain in his voice was anything to go by, Anatolius took a deep breath, then stood, still holding his wife's hand. The night before he'd left for war, he'd promised to return. He'd promised to her worried tears that she'd see him again. That promise had been fulfilled, but it felt hollow now. A sudden rage seized him. He dropped her hand. Then, despite his weakness, he stormed to the side of the creature who had attacked him. The thing that had ransacked his kingdom, destroyed his home, murdered his people and his family. He reached out and ripped the sword from her chest, scoring it down her belly to upend her innards onto his floor. "How dare you!" he snarled. Blood arced as he swung the blade down, then sprayed out as he drove the blade into the dead monster again. "How dare you! How dare you! You God's damned rat! You disgusting wretch! I was loyal to the gods. I commanded an army. I destroyed my enemy. How dare you spit in my face like this?" With each heartbeat, he swung the sword again and again and again. Blood drenched the floor, splattered the walls, and soaked up the ash from the fire, coating his clothing in sprays of red and black. A bit of it got in his eyes, his mouth, as he screamed his defiance. He didn't care, even as he tasted it going down. He didn't stop until the body was unrecognizable. Chunks of meat decorated with once fine fabric and putrid viscera. Even then, he didn't want to stop. But his fatigued muscles gave out, his arms refusing to lift the blade. He glared at the thing, the only bit of it still vaguely intact, its mouth, still agape. Then that mouth closed and smiled at him. "So you accept," came a voice, though the lips didn't move further. He blinked, about to turn to Theodoros to ask if he'd heard it too, then froze. Anatolius was no longer in his room. He looked around, finding a field devoid of color. He spun sluggishly, wondering if he'd threat of exhaustion, if he was about to be approached by Karen and guided by Ferry to join his family. For a moment, He hoped so. Then a sound echoed. A footstep. A figure did approach him, but not the figure of the god he expected. A familiar figure, with lizard's legs and a thin, whip-like tail. He hissed and crouched down, sword ready, and lunged forward with a strength he thought had abandoned him. "Wrong way, King," said the woman's voice. Snidely, he whirled on her, slashing once more with his blade. Again, her voice was behind him, though this time it was an exasperated sigh. "Maybe I won't tell you what you've done to yourself. It's more fun to imagine your despair from Tartarus. Anyway," he turned, though this time confusion stayed his hand. "What I've done to myself?" The creature gave him a flat look, clearly disappointed. "Yes, you could have let me kill you. I came to your kingdom, destroyed it, slowly drained your wife, and let your son choke on his own death in the cellar. And you didn't bother to ask me why. I'm insulted, Your Majesty." He curled his lip. "Why would I want to know why? You deserve death." "Oh, I'm already dead. Good job on that, too. Though if you'd been a little quicker, you might have escaped." "What?" He paused. She'd opened her mouth, tongue tracing his blood off her fangs. He reached up, finding the wound she'd given him, though in this strange place, touching the area didn't hurt. "I've made you immortal," she said smugly, hands on her hips. "That wasn't my goal, though. I am very old, Anatolius. I was hoping to die. I was just glad for a little fuss on my way out." "Why seek me out for that?" he demanded, hand still on the wound, as if by covering it, he could avoid the immortality she promised. Something told him it wasn't the immortality he might have wanted. "I've heard of the wars you Greeks wage," she said conversationally. Lifting one hand from her hip, she cupped the air, and Anatolius jumped back as a lithe flame danced in her palm. "I carry a power to make them more destructive, as made evident by what I did to your home. The power of one creature's rage. I did not bring those soldiers, Anatolius. That was one of your allies, sending their army to defend your people. They failed. You..." His mouth went dry. "You did all this on your own?" She grinned, crooking her fingers around the flame in her hand. Upon closer inspection, that flame was bigger than it appeared. Bright orange, bleeding into a pinkish hue, and then darkening to black as they curled around her cruel grin. "That was my power, Anatolius. And now it's yours." She swept forward soundlessly. Then, suddenly, her hand was on his chest, the tips of her claws digging into his flesh and caging the flame against his skin. He screamed, but before he could swing his sword again, she'd pressed it into his chest. Everything became blinding pain. The fire seemed to consume his heart then flood through him, along the paths of his veins, setting him alight. That strange flame morphed him into a human-shaped bonfire. Everything was flame. All he knew, everything he'd ever known, was that flame. It burned away every bit of him, leaving a smoldering hunk of coal in his place. Within himself, he saw two faces. His wife, smiling at him, her dazzling beam burning away the memory of her dead in her bed. That of a young boy, older than he'd known his son, but undoubtedly him all the same, grinning playfully up at him through the mess of curls on his head. Though made of that flame, he reached out, pulling the both of them into an embrace. When he woke again, once more looking up at his own ash and blood-flecked ceiling, once more with Theodorus's face looking with concern down at him. There were tears in his eyes. Anatolius's home had been destroyed. To the person who buys my house, months ago, I uprooted my entire life and moved across the country with very little plan. My wife left me out of the blue. With no tether, I cashed out my 401k and threw caution to the wind. I drove until I saw snow before deciding to try out the small town life. After nailing down a full-time job and growing tired of life in the town's only hotel, I reached out to a realtor and asked her to show me the house that's been on the market the longest. A fixer-upper was just what I needed. The realtor didn't have much information on the home outside of the basics, but I was sold as soon as I saw it. 3 stories, isolated deep in the woods. What more could a man looking to start over with a project ask for? After closing, I was given a fill folder containing all the important information. With all the standard documents was a handwritten letter from the previous homeowner. The contents of the letter have me questioning if I made the right choice, but I've never been one to turn down a challenge. I have typed the contents of the letter below. To the person who buys my house, congratulations on the purchase of your new home. Or perhaps, should I say, you're welcome for your new home. I can only imagine what type of person you may be. A first-time home buyer? A newlywed couple just starting out? A growing family looking for more space? A retiree longing to be away from the hustle and bustle of the city? Or even just an investor looking for rental properties? The possibilities are endless, but no less exciting. Just as exciting as when my late husband and I first purchased the property so many years ago. The tree covering so far off the main road made such a serene setting. We just couldn't picture ourselves living anywhere else. However, all things must come to an end. Such is life. I'm not as young as I once was. My children worried for me out here all alone. Or so they say. My oldest daughter decided the property was too much for me to care for on my own anymore, and encouraged me to move to the old folks' home in the next town. As loath as I was to leave the home we spent such wonderful years in, I could no longer argue with her. The upkeep was getting to be a little much for these old bones. I agreed, on one condition, that the home not be put up for sale until my death. So, if you are receiving this letter, I have shuffled off this mortal coil. That also means that the house has most likely sat vacant for some time. In that case, there are a few matters of housekeeping you should be aware of. As you may have noticed when you viewed the property, the house is quite the old gal. Her 3 stories stand tall and formidable in the dense forest surrounding it. Though the trees tower over her, she will not be cowed. The roof has held up better than we ever expected with so many trees around. It was replaced in 2018, another urging of my oldest daughter. Though it had only a few cosmetic issues at the time, the trees closest to the home are sturdy and hardly ever dare to drop their branches directly on the roof. By the time you move in, it may be time for a fresh coat of paint, though I found the house does prefer to be a light blue with white trim. She likes to stand out amongst the darkness of the forest. I'll never forget the way the old gal gleamed at Christmas time, with string lights shining bright enough to light up the snow all around. Oh, I do hope you have the most wondrous Christmases there. Anyway, I've gotten off track. Yes, the house will require a new coat of paint, and I'm sure you will decorate the inside as you see fit. Before you start to move too much around, be aware that some of the items in the house have been strategically placed. For you to fully understand what a treasure you have just purchased, I feel it is pertinent for me to tell you a little story. My Reginald and I purchased the home fully furnished before any of our children were brought into this world. The first year we lived there was pure bliss. Young and in love, we dedicated almost all of our time to each other. My husband fondly referred to this time as our honeymoon phase. One of our favorite activities was exploring the vast property surrounding us. When the weather did not permit roaming, we explored the home itself, though from the outside it appears as any manor in the woods would. Inside is much to be discovered. During that first year, we enjoyed the convenience of it being fully furnished and move-in ready. But over time, I yearned to decorate, to make the space my own. Reginald, ever the obedient husband, humored me. We started by taking down every painting that hung on the walls, deciding which to keep, which to sell away, and which to simply move to a different area. That is when the first odd discovery was made. Behind a great many of the paintings, there were holes, right in the plaster walls. Some appeared to be methodically cut in perfect squares, others as though a fist was punched straight through it. We, of course, decided that those would eventually be covered back up. I piled the painting up in the drawing room and set about cleaning the walls. By the end of the day, I had yet to decide on what exactly to do with them. So I let them lie and went to bed. In the morning, however, they were all hung perfectly back in their spots, as if all my work had never happened. For days, I assumed Reginald had done it, and he assumed I had. We ultimately didn't speak of it until it was too late, when my Reginald started back to work as supervisor of the factory in town. I resumed my endeavor to make the home feel like it was mine. I hated the big rugs scattered all around the place. I've always preferred a nice hardwood floor. No need for carpets that hold all the dirt and hair that's dragged in. The furniture was easy enough to move out of my way, and the rugs all rolled up nicely. I was mighty proud of my hard work until I got a good look at the wood. Large, dark, discolored splotches marred what should have been beautiful hardwood hiding under those ghastly rugs, which I'm sure you've seen. Unfortunately, much like the paintings, the rugs remained. I'd go into more detail, but some of the full truths have been lost to time. But I will tell you, be careful what you look behind or under. Though the house allowed me to dust and paint and add decor as my heart desired, it did not allow me to leave any of its secret spots uncovered. Behind dressers, cabinets, doors, paintings, mirrors, and under couches, chairs, and beds, the house hides. After the first year, I gave up trying to rearrange and became content with adding a few of my own touches here and there. I think that once the house realized I'd stopped trying to change it so much, it settled down. For a while at least, we entered a time of peace again. But the monotony of loneliness began to get to me. Thankfully, we soon welcomed our oldest daughter. As soon as she arrived, the house awoke with laughter and joy. All hours of the night, she would giggle, and the house seemed to echo with it, those echoes long lingering even after she fell asleep. As we welcomed more children, it seemed that no matter how much we tied, the house remained scattered with toys. It was as if I'd turn my back and they'd all jump right off the shelf and resume their places on the floor. The never-ending chore of putting away made me weary to my bones. In a stroke of wisdom, my Reginald decided one summer to send the children to my mother's for a week. She lived on the coast, never one for the colder air where we chose to live. We didn't see her often, and the children did love her so. Off they went without a complaint, leaving my love and I alone for the first time in over a decade. We didn't know what to do with ourselves. That first night, it was as if we were newlyweds again. But I won't traumatize you with any of that. We felt so young again, only waking when the sun finally shone through our bedroom window, with no rush to feed the masses. When we finally emerged from our bed a little after noon, we walked into an unexpected scene. Every toy, book, pen, shoe, and piece of sports equipment that belonged to the children had been strewn about the first floor in the most uncivilized manner. There was no question that the house had been perfectly clean the night before. Our first thought was that we'd been burgled, that someone had broken in, thinking we'd all left for the coast. The only problem is, we told no one the children were leaving, and we had no neighbors to have noticed their departure. Regardless, we checked for signs of forced entry on all the doors and windows. Finding nothing, we were forced to believe it was whatever force we had once felt in our home, agitated with us once more. As you've probably ascertained, the house is very particular. We had come to accept not being able to move the furniture or pictures, but were only just realizing that the house did not like many of the new things we'd brought in either. How many times had I picked certain toys up off the floor, only to find them there again in the morning? How many times had I unfairly blamed the children for messes they claimed they knew nothing about? That morning, we saw the truth of the matter, and I knew something had to change. The children didn't deserve my anger or anxiety. They were not to blame. When they returned, I was sure to tell them as much. But before then, we had to find a way to coexist again with the forces in the house. What should have been a week of relaxation and reconnecting became a week of trial and error. On the first day, we tidied the house, putting everything back where we thought everything should go. Each room made perfect. Then we waited for the first item to fall out of place. As if the house was testing us, it took hours for anything to happen that first day. Then it started, slowly at first, giving us time to notice the items that were out of place, time to correct. It seemed to go in order of the things that bothered it the most, or maybe just the longest. The first toy to go was a set of bells we'd gotten when our oldest was small. The set was a popular toy amongst all our babies, with our youngest being nearly 8 at the time. These bells hadn't truly rung joyously through the house in years, yet they always made their way off the shelf onto the rug. Our family's peace was more important than any sentimentality, or at least that's what my husband and I agreed. And into the bin they went. Quickly, we noticed patterns. Toys that made too much noise. Shoes that left scuffs on the floor. Sports equipment that may or may not have been involved in a few broken windows and busted light bulbs. Books that sat too heavy on the overburdened bookshelves. Room by room we went, removing any and all items the house found to be offensive. It was by no means an easy undertaking. So many items had many more years of use left in them. But knowing what I knew, I could no longer sacrifice my sanity for a few boxes full of possessions. When the last box of offending items left the property, it was as if the house itself took a deep, calming breath. I hadn't quite realized just how stressed I'd been feeling until I didn't feel it anymore. Weight I'd grown accustomed to bearing eased off my shoulders. The air was lighter, the lights were brighter, and the house even seemed to smell better. Not that there was a noticeable bad smell before. Everything just felt better. That night, Reginald and I slept deeply for the first time in years, waking refreshed and ready for anything. I was ready for my children to come home. This week had been the longest we'd been apart since the youngest was born. I'd spent 2 weeks in the hospital that time, but that's neither here nor there. We had 2 more days before my mother would return them to us, sun-kissed and spoiled rotten in the best way. In those 2 days, I made time to sit quietly and listen to the house the way I used to when it was just Reginald and myself. Familiar creaks and groans greeted my ears. My senses were filled with the house. The smell of wood, water, earth, detergents, fabric, food, all seemed to swirl around me. For a long while, it was all just the normal feelings of home, of any home. Every house I'd ever lived in had the same smells and sounds. I assume every house in the whole world has the same base set of smells, sounds, and lights. I knew there was something past that, though, here. So I waited. A few months back, I'd read a book on meditation, hoping to help lift some of the stress I'd been buried under. While I waited, I took a few quests from my readings. I methodically relaxed each muscle, starting at my toes and working my way to my head. I felt each breath as it traveled in and out of my lungs. I tried to tune my ears inward to listen to the beating of my heart, attempting to hear the blood rushing through my veins. That's when I finally heard the breathing. It wasn't my own. It was offbeat of mine. Reginald wasn't home. We had no pets, but the slow, deep, steady breaths were just a whisper in my ear. I focused with all my might on the sound, hoping to pinpoint the direction it was coming from. Realization dawned on me. I was all around me, as if I was inside a lung. Then, a heartbeat, slower than my own, reverberated around me. Slowly, I opened my eyes. What I saw changed everything. Ever so lightly, the walls billowed in and out. Ever so slightly, the chandelier above my head rhythmically bobbed, as if contracting, thrumming. Everything in the central family room moved in a steady beat. How many days had we spent in this room? The majority of our lives circulated in this room, where we were most often all together as a family, the way a family room should be used. We often joked that this room was the heart of the house, because there was always so much love here. We were not wrong. This room truly holds the heart of the home. You may think I'm crazy, but I am telling you, here and now, the house is alive. It is not haunted. There are no goblins or ghouls. The house itself is a living, breathing being, a being that I have cared for, just as it has cared for me, for more years than I care to count. You see, my daughter never believed. She did not understand. When I finally agreed that I was too old to care for the house on my own, it was because the house told me so. Not her. I was growing too old to care for it, and in turn, it could no longer care for me. It needs someone younger, someone to breathe new life into it again. And if you care for it, it will care for you. When tended to properly, it will multiply your life and give you more than you can ever imagine. I do hope Carmen found the right person to take on the challenge. I pray the house does not miss us too terribly much. If you follow the rules, then it should grow to love you, too, I'm sure. With love, Cynthia. Rule 1. Don't move the furniture. Rule 2. Don't leave any holes uncovered. Rule 3. Don't make changes. Only fix things that break. Rule 4. Don't put anything on the mantle in the bedroom. Rule 5. Never throw balls inside. Rule 6. Never scream at your partner inside. On the grounds is fine. Rule 7. Always walk gently. Rule 8. Always lock the doors. Rule 9. Always listen to the house. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. I have lived in the house for a week now. What I thought to be the ramblings of a crazy old woman who wanted nothing more than to stay with her home have quickly become undeniable truths. On my second night, the house welcomed me in a way only it could have. I'm not sure if this makes me just as crazy as her, but I've vowed to care for this home as long as it cares for me. We're off to a great start. Car radio. The silence is deafening. Finley stares at the empty slot where the radio should be. The hole in the center console mocks him. The engine roars and jumps to life. Finley laughs at the power and presses the gas pedal. The engine responds and races down the street. He sighs and shrugs off the silence. At least it's a nice car, he thinks to himself. Finley grips the steering wheel tighter and continues to drive. He's never driven a convertible before. The large amount of snacks sits in the passenger seat. 3 bags of chips, several candy bars, a meat stick, a couple of grape sodas, Red Bull, and an orange Gatorade are piled into a small mountain next to Finley. There is also $437 in his pocket. Finley glances at the convenience store in the rear view mirror as he drives away. The gun wasn't loaded, but the clerk behind the desk didn't need to know that. She graciously gives up her drawer in exchange for her life. Finley smiles as the memory of the robbery passes through his head again. "Everything in the drawer, now," he shouts. The clerk cries, but nods in understanding and opens the register. Ding. This is much easier with a gun, thinks Finley. He grins under his mask. He holds the basket of snacks in his free hand and points the gun at the clerk. Ida is the name on her shirt. She's short with straight black hair and small eyes. Tears run down her cheeks as she collects the bills. With a shaky hand, she gives the money to Finley. "Thank you," Finley decides to say. He runs out the store and watches as a Chevrolet Corvette pulls up to the store. An older gentleman shuts off the engine and opens the door to get out. He sees the gun before he sees Finley. "Give me the keys," Finley says loudly to the man. The elderly man jumps in surprise and quickly hands the keys to Finley. Finley dumps the basket of snacks into the passenger seat, puts the car in reverse, and drives down the road. When he is clear of the scene, he pulls off his mask and tosses it on the floor. He goes to adjust the radio, but the dial isn't there. The whole compartment is empty. Finley is an average man with an average build. His curly locks meet his eyebrows and licks his earlobes. His eyes are wide and too big for his narrow face, close together with long lashes. Stubble on his chin creeps its way up to his sideburns. The long bridge of his nose flares into broad nostrils, and his big pink lips pushes out from his face. He has a birthmark in the shape of a small diamond under his left eye. His cheeks are freckled and covered with a thin layer of dirt. Finley prefers Xbox over PlayStation and drinks apple juice more than a grown man should. He hates roller coasters because he has to sit next to strangers. He loves school, but dropped out his senior year. Finley is passionate, creative, and extremely intelligent. Finley wasn't always a thief, but the worst in his life brings out the best in him. Did I forget to feed Edison? Finley thinks to himself. Edison is his pet goldfish, who spends his days in a sphere on Finley's nightstand. Finley's hamster died in a freak vacuum accident when he was in kindergarten, and since then, he was against pets. Edison was a prize Finley had reluctantly won at a carnival. So far, he's lasted over a year and tripled in size. Finley tugs nervously at his Iron Maiden shirt as he passes a cop. He checks his speed and cautiously pulls the seatbelt over his chest and clicks it into place. He thinks, "Don't pull me over, please? He isn't ready to deal with the police. He hasn't thought this far ahead. The officer turns left and into a gas station. Finley sighs, relief, and looks back at where the radio should be. It's too quiet for him. His thoughts float carelessly through his head. He pictures himself as a police officer for a moment and laughs at the thought. If his dad was around, or if his mother stopped drinking, if his brother never beat him, and if he stayed in school. He wondered where his life would have been then. What kind of person he would be now. An outstanding citizen, he imagines, with a wife and kids. He creates the vision of his family in his head. A woman with large breasts and red hair. 2 kids, 1 boy and 1 girl, with toothless smiles on their dirty faces. They would be soccer players, like Finley was, and always outside. He shakes off the thought. Sucks not having a radio, he thinks. He sits up taller in the driver's seat and lets out a little scream. Ah! He relaxes and slumps back into his seat. He tries to whistle and fails, only allowing air to escape his pursed lips. He blows a tune through his teeth and grunts in frustration. I wish I knew how to whistle. Both my parents could. Even Franklin can, he says in his head. He tries again, and a small tweet of a sound flies from in between his lips. He grins at his small accomplishment. I hate tuna fish, he thinks. Finley starts to space out behind the wheel. The lack of sound tricks his brain. He visualizes a concert he went to last year. He remembers all the pockets he picked and wallets he stole. He made 5 times the amount of the cost of the tickets he paid for, but wasn't able to enjoy the concert properly. The songs of the band echoes throughout his mind. He taps the steering wheel to the beat of the song stuck in his head. He hums the melody. He looked back at the center console and sighed loudly. There wasn't even a clock. What time is it? He wondered. I should have stolen a watch. Or a car with a radio. The car was quiet. Even the purr of the engine was hushed. Everything is still, except the thoughts in Finley's head. He thinks about the graduation he never attended, the smell of his last girlfriend right before she walked out the door, the taste of sea salt ice cream, and how it was superior to any other flavor. He pictures the last family photo they had together when times were good. How Franklin had his arm around him in a rare, loving embrace. It is loud in Finley's head, and there is no sound to hide behind. He groans and tries to shake off all his thoughts, clear his head. It's no use. The thoughts always come back, stronger and louder than before. He is going mad from the silence. I can pull the steering wheel. It would be easy to wreck such a nice car. The guardrail teases Finley. He envisions the crash in his head and plays out the scene slowly. The metal twisted around the body of the convertible, the popped wheel, and broken windshield. He shakes off the thought and continues driving, now upset by the concept he created in his mind. He can't distract himself from himself. There was nothing to drown out his perception of his own ideations. He can't clear his head. He's trapped within himself. Finley screams and pulls the car over. The wheels spin angrily against the dirt on the shoulder. He bangs the steering wheel with a fist and groans. He hears the sound of sirens and looks in the mirror. He didn't notice the police officer that pulled a U-turn at the last intersection. He didn't see the car behind him getting closer and closer. He watches as a police officer steps out of his squad car and aims a gun at his Corvette. Now what? This isn't part of his plan. He licks his lips and glares at his new challenge. He throws the car into drive and slams on the gas pedal. The car lurches forward and spins wildly back on the road. The cop calls it in and drives after Finley. The two-lane road was barren. The twists and turns makes Finley feel he was back on a roller coaster without the strangers. The contents of his stomach sloshes around. Well, this is great. He wanders ahead, trying to come up with a plan. He didn't know these streets that well, and another police car pulls up alongside Finley. He kicks up the speed and lets out a yelp as the car responds. They race down the street. The sirens blare loudly. Finley watches as the police cars serve and drive around each other like synchronized swimmers after him. These guys are good, but not as good as me. I need to lose them. He thinks about car chase videos he's watched online and in movies. The bad guy always gets caught somehow, with some small mistake he plans to avoid. He turns down a dirt road quickly, but the cars behind don't falter and follow him. The dirt is slick on the wheels, and with the sharp turn, he flips the car. He curses himself as the car rolls into the ditch upside down. The sound of scrapping metal pierces his ears. It's quiet for a moment as the dust settles. He wasn't going to get caught. Especially now, they will find out exactly how many people he's robbed. He isn't planning on going to jail. Edison would miss him. Step out of the vehicle with your hands in the air, the officer shouts, spit flying out of his mouth. They were behind open car doors, ready for Finley to react. Finley's heart races as his hands went for the unloaded gun. "You'll never take me alive, coppers," he shouts in his mind. He smiles. He was on the track and field team in high school. Surely he could outrun the police. He's done it before, with success. He pushes the car door open, and without thinking, Finley hops out the car and runs, pointing the gun behind him. His feet slip on the loose gravel, but he collects himself and moves his feet fast underneath him. He takes 3 more steps away from the police, gun heavy in his hands. Bang! The silence is deafening, so today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.